Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I first arrived in Millbrook in October 1981. Langley had sent me. My assignment was simple: inspect a routine observation point in a small town, collect the monthly reports, and return. It was a short 3-day job. No one explained to me why Millbrook was special. The briefing was very inadequate. My supervisor gave me a 1-page summary, a set of keys, and a manila folder containing directions to the town. When I asked about the background of the operation, he said it was need-to-know information, and that I didn't need to know. Standard administrative inspection. Get in, get out. Nothing complicated. I should have questioned why they were sending someone with my limited field experience. I should have wondered why a routine inspection required classified clearance protocols. I should have asked why the folder was so thin for a program that had been running since 1967. But I was ambitious, 28 years old. A GS-11 administrative officer hungry to prove myself capable of more than processing paperwork in a windowless office. This was my chance to show I could handle field assignments. Maybe earn a promotion, maybe get out from behind my desk permanently. So I took the assignment without asking questions. The town sat in eastern Pennsylvania, nowhere near any major highway. Population 1,827 according to the 1980 census. 1 main street, 1 diner, 1 post office. The kind of place people pass through on accident and forgot immediately. I was a GS-11 administrative officer. I handled paperwork, verified compliance protocols, ensured field stations maintained proper documentation standards. Nothing glamorous, nothing dangerous. I'd been with the agency for 6 years and never once left the Washington metro area for work. My job was to make sure forms were filed correctly, to verify that field stations followed proper procedures, to identify discrepancies in reports and recommend corrective action. I was good at it. Thorough, detail-oriented, the kind of person who noticed when dates didn't align or when signatures looked inconsistent. But I had no training in field operations, no experience with active intelligence gathering, no context for what surveillance actually looked like outside of training manuals and policy documents. They were sending a bureaucrat to inspect a spy post. At the time, I thought it made sense. Administrative oversight, compliance verification. Stay in my lane. Now I understand they chose me specifically because I was exactly the wrong person for the job. The drive took 4 hours. Fall leaves covered the 2-lane road leading into town. I left Washington before dawn, drove west through Pennsylvania as the sun came up behind me. The landscape shifted gradually from suburban sprawl to farmland to dense forest. The roads got narrower, the houses farther apart. I stopped for gas in a town called Harrisville, population maybe 300. The attendant, an elderly man with oil-stained hands, asked where I was headed. When I said Millbrook, he looked at me strangely. "You got family there?" "Business." He nodded slowly, like that explained something. Not much business in Millbrook these days, not since the mill cut back. "What kind of mill?" "Lumber. Used to employ half the town. Now it's maybe 20 guys working part-time." He finished filling my tank and I paid him. As I drove away, I watched him in the rearview mirror. He stood by the pumps, watching my car, until I turned onto the highway and he disappeared from view. The last 20 miles to Millbrook took me through state forest. Dense pines on both sides. No houses, no side roads, just the narrow highway cutting through wilderness. Then the forest opened up, and I saw the town. Everything looked normal. A Presbyterian church with white siding and a tall steeple. A hardware store with faded awnings. A small municipal building that served as both town hall and police station. A volunteer fire department. A post office no bigger than a 2-car garage. Main Street ran for about 8 blocks. Most of the storefronts were occupied but looked tired. Weathered signs, chipped paint, windows that needed washing. The kind of slow decay that happens in small towns when the economy shifts and nobody has money for maintenance. I saw maybe a dozen people on the sidewalks. They moved slowly, going about their business with the unhurried pace of rural America. An old woman with a shopping bag. A man in coveralls talking to someone in a pickup truck. A mother pushing a stroller. Normal, completely normal. But something felt off. I couldn't identify what. The scene was too normal, maybe. Too quiet. Like a movie set dressed to look like a small town, but missing some essential element that would make it feel lived in. I drove slowly down Main Street looking for Fisher's drugstore. I found it on the corner of Main and Oak, a 2-story brick building with the pharmacy on the ground floor and what looked like apartments or offices above. The observation post was located above Fisher's drugstore on Main Street. I parked my rental car out front and climbed the exterior stairs to the 2nd floor. The steps were metal, painted brown, with rust showing through in places. They rang with each footstep, announcing my arrival. The door had no markings, just a number, 2B, no company name, no agency identification. Nothing to suggest this was anything other than a storage room or empty office space. I knocked, no answer. I listened, no sound from inside. I used the key they'd given me at Langley. The lock was new. I could tell by the lack of scratches around the keyhole. Everything else about this building looked old and neglected, but this lock had been installed recently. Within the last year, I'd guess. The door opened smoothly, well-oiled hinges. No creak. The space inside was larger than I expected. 3 rooms. The front room contained 2 desks, filing cabinets, and a large window overlooking Main Street. The middle room held communication equipment, mostly dormant. The back room was locked, and my key didn't fit. The front room looked like any administrative office. Fluorescent lights, cheap carpet, a coffee maker on a small table. The desks were clean but showed signs of use. Papers in organized stacks, pens in holders, a calendar on the wall showing October 1981. But the window bothered me. It was large, giving a clear view of Main Street below, good for observation. But there were no curtains, no blinds. Anyone on the street could look up and see directly into the office. That seemed wrong for a surveillance post. You'd want to observe without being observed. You'd want to hide your presence, unless you wanted people to know you were there, unless visibility was part of the program. The communication equipment in the middle room looked dated. Reel-to-reel tape recorders, a radio receiver, telephone recording devices. Nothing high-tech. Everything looked like it had been installed in the late 60s and never upgraded. Some of the equipment was running. I could see spools turning slowly on the tape recorders, though I couldn't hear any sound. Recording something. Always recording. The back room had a solid wooden door with a deadbolt. My key didn't work. I tried both keys they'd given me. Neither fit. I checked my watch. 2:05 p.m. Agent Howell was supposed to meet me here at 2 o'clock. Agent Howell was supposed to meet me here at 2 p.m. It was 2:17. I waited. At 2:45, I heard footsteps on the stairs. The door opened. Agent Howell looked exactly like his personnel photo. Mid-40s, thinning hair, wire-frame glasses, medium build. He wore slacks and a cardigan sweater. He could have been a high school math teacher. "You're Fletcher," he said. Not a question. Yes, sir. They send you to check up on me? Routine inspection, quarterly protocol. He nodded slowly, studying me. His eyes had dark circles underneath. You read the briefing file? I did. Then you know what we do here. I knew what the briefing file said. Millbrook had been designated an observation site in 1967 as part of a domestic monitoring program. The program itself wasn't unusual. Dozens of small towns across America served similar functions. The agency maintained low-visibility posts in these locations to monitor behavioral patterns, track demographic shifts, and assess the effectiveness of various information dissemination methods. The briefing file called it sociological research, purely observational, no active interventions, no contact with local population, just watching and recording. I'd like to review your logs and monthly reports, I said. Howell walked to one of the filing cabinets and pulled out a thick folder. He set it on the desk. Everything's there. October 1980 through September 1981. I opened the folder and began reading. The reports followed standard format. Date, time, observations, notes. Howell's handwriting was neat, almost mechanical. October 12, 1980. Subject group gathered at Methodist Church for evening service. Attendance 47. Duration 1 hour. 12 minutes, no anomalies. November 3, 1980. Presidential election. Polling location, municipal building. Turnout, 68% of registered voters. Results consistent with regional patterns. No anomalies. December 25, 1980. Christmas Day. Observed family gatherings through standard surveillance. Gift exchange patterns conform to expected socioeconomic indicators. No anomalies. Page after page of this. Mundane observations of mundane life in a mundane town. Everything looks in order, I said. It always is. I flipped to the back of the folder. The September 1981 report was shorter than the others. Just 1 page. September 14, 1981. Routine monitoring continues. No anomalies. That was it. 1 sentence for an entire month. Your September report is incomplete, I said. Howell didn't respond immediately. He walked to the window and looked down at Main Street. After a long moment, he said, Nothing happened in September worth reporting. You're required to document daily observations. I documented what mattered. I closed the folder. Agent Howell, the protocols are clear. You need to maintain detailed logs even during periods of low activity. That's the whole point of continuous monitoring. He turned from the window. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture had. How long have you worked for the agency, Fletcher? 6 years. How many field assignments? This is my first. He smiled slightly, not a warm smile. They sent a rookie to inspect me. I'm here to verify documentation compliance, that's all. You don't know what you're looking at, do you? I'm looking at incomplete reports. Howell walked to the locked door at the back of the office. He pulled a key from his pocket. Come with me. The back room was smaller than the others. It contained a single desk, a safe, and an entire wall of filing cabinets. These were older, military surplus from the look of them. Green metal with combination locks. Howell opened one of the cabinets. Inside were dozens of reels of audio tape, each labeled with dates. He selected one marked July 1981 and carried it to a reel-to-reel player on the desk. What is this? I asked. This is what we actually do here. He threaded the tape and pressed play. Static, then voices. A woman talking to a man. Casual conversation about groceries, the weather, their daughter's piano recital. The audio quality was excellent, like they were in the room with us. That's Linda Morrison talking to her husband Paul, Howell said. Recorded in their kitchen, July 18, 1981, approximately 6:30 p.m. This wasn't in the briefing file. No, it wasn't. He stopped the tape and selected another one. August 1981. This tape captured a different conversation. A man and woman arguing about money, bills they couldn't pay, a loan that was overdue. Richard and Susan Garrett, Howell said. Their bedroom, August 9th. I felt cold. You've been conducting surveillance inside their homes? For 14 years. The briefing file said observational monitoring only. No active collection. The briefing file you read was written for people like you, administrative officers, GS-11s, who process paperwork and verify protocols. What's the actual program? Howell ejected the tape. Millbrook isn't an observation site. It's a controlled environment. Has been since 1967. Every phone line is tapped. Microphones in most homes. Cameras in the municipal building, the post office, the school. We monitor everything. Why? To see what happens. What do you mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the safe and removed a thick binder. The cover was marked Millbrook Operational History, Classified. Read this tonight, he said, handing it to me. All of it, then we'll talk tomorrow. I'm supposed to complete my inspection today and leave tomorrow morning. Change your plans. I looked at the binder in my hands. What's in here? The truth about Millbrook. He walked to the door. There's a motel on Route 40, about 3 miles west of town. The Sleepy Hollow. Check in there. Don't stay in Millbrook overnight. Why not? Because I don't know if they're watching you yet. He left. I heard his footsteps descending the stairs, then the sound of a car engine starting. I stood alone in the back room, holding the classified binder, surrounded by filing cabinets full of audio tapes documenting 14 years of surveillance on 1,847 people who had no idea they were being monitored. I should have left right then. Driven back to Washington, filed a report about the irregularities, let the appropriate oversight committees handle it. Instead, I locked the office and drove to the Sleepy Hollow Motel. The room was clean but dated. Brown carpet, floral wallpaper, a black rotary phone on the nightstand. I sat on the bed and opened the binder. The first page was a memorandum dated April 3rd, 1967. 2. Deputy Director, Domestic Operations. From Dr. Malcolm Reeves, Behavioral Sciences Division. Project Millbrook. Authorization request. The memorandum outlined a proposal to establish a long-term behavioral monitoring program in a small, isolated community. The stated objective was to study how information flows through social networks, how opinions form and change, and how communities respond to various stimuli over extended periods. What made Millbrook ideal, according to Dr. Reeves, was its isolation and stability. Low population turnover. Minimal external influence. A closed social system perfect for longitudinal study. The proposal requested authorization for comprehensive surveillance infrastructure and a duration of no less than 15 years. At the bottom of the page, a handwritten signature approved the program. I turned to the next section, Implementation Timeline. May 1967. Initial survey team deployed. Population demographics analyzed. Key social nodes identified. Mayor, school principal, prominent business owners, church leaders. June 1967. Technical installation phase. Telephone intercepts established through cooperation with regional provider. Microphone systems installed in selected residences during a coordinated gas leak inspection that required temporary evacuation of the affected homes. July 1967. Observation post established above Fisher's Drug Store. Agent Howell assigned as primary observer. August 1967. Full operational status achieved. Continuous monitoring commenced. The next 100 pages detailed the surveillance infrastructure in technical terms I barely understood. Frequencies, transmission protocols, recording schedules. What I did understand was the scale. They weren't just monitoring the town. They were recording everything. Then I reached a section that made me stop. It was titled Stimulus Introduction. October 1969. First controlled information insertion. False news story regarding potential highway development planted through municipal council member. Objective: measure information dissemination speed and community opinion formation. Results: story reached 67% of a population within 72 hours. Opinion divided along predicted socioeconomic lines. Community meeting held. Local newspaper published editorial. Information life cycle: 19 days from insertion to resolution. March 1971. Second stimulus. Anonymous letters sent to 5 households suggesting infidelity among neighbors. Objective: test social cohesion under interpersonal stress. Results: 3 of 5 marriages experienced measurable strain. 1 separation. Social network fragmentation observed. Church attendance decreased 14%. Recovery period: 6 months. I kept reading. There were dozens of these. They'd been running experiments on the town, not just watching, acting. June 1973. Financial pressure test. Coordinated reduction in seasonal employment at primary employer, lumber mill. Objective: assess community response to economic stress. Results: 23 families affected. Observed increased alcohol purchases, domestic disputes, school truancy. Stress-related medical visits up 34%. 2 bankruptcies. Migration. 1 family departed town. November 1975. Authority perception modification. Anonymous campaign suggesting municipal corruption. Objective: measure trust degradation in local government. Results: petition drive initiated by citizens. Mayor subjected to informal investigation. Town council meeting attendance increased 340%. Trust in local government reduced from baseline 78% approval to 34% approval. Partial recovery observed after 14 months. They were treating the entire town like a laboratory, testing how far they could push before something broke. I reached the final section. Recent observations. The entries here were different, shorter, less clinical. They read more like diary entries. January 1981. AH. Population appears stable. Standard monitoring continues. Some residual effects from 1979 employment tests still observable. Advised DC that recovery metrics are within acceptable range. April 1981. AH. Noticed anomaly during routine surveillance. Subject Morrison, Linda, observed having identical conversation with the subject Garrett, Susan, on April 12th and April 13th. Same words, same phrasing. Checked recordings, conversations occurred at different times, but language was identical. Possible equipment malfunction. May 1981. AH. Anomaly repeating. Multiple subjects using identical phrases across different contexts. Requested technical inspection of recording equipment. Technician confirmed equipment functioning properly. June 1981. AH. Phenomenon increasing. Yesterday, observed 7 separate individuals use the phrase "it's like we talked about" in conversations with different people. No apparent connection between speakers. No shared context. Reviewed previous month's recordings. Pattern not present before March 1981. July 1981. AH. Verbal repetition now affecting approximately 40% of monitored population. Phrases appear to circulate independent of normal information flow. Subject Morrison used phrase, "The time is almost ready," in conversation with husband. Same phrase used by subject Hayes, grocery store owner, in completely unrelated conversation 2 hours later. No contact between subjects that day. August 1981. AH. Contacted DC requesting guidance. Described phenomenon. Requested investigation team. DC response. Continue monitoring. Do not intervene. Do not make contact with population. Ensure surveillance integrity maintained. I'm following protocols, but I need to state for the record. This isn't normal information dissemination. This is something else. September 1981. AH. I don't know how to document what I'm observing anymore. The phrases are everywhere now. People speak them with no awareness. When I review the tapes, I can hear myself saying them too. In my own logs. Words I don't remember writing. The recordings from September are missing. I know I made them. I was here every day, I watched, I listened, I recorded. But when I go to file them, they're already filed, already labeled, already dated. I found my own voice on a tape labeled October 15th, 1981. But today is September 28th, 1981. That was the last entry. I checked the date on my watch. October 15th, 1981. I'd been certain it was October 13th when I left Washington yesterday. The drive took 4 hours. I arrived in the afternoon. That would make today October 14th, but my watch said October 15th. The date on the motel room TV guide said October 15th. The newspaper I'd seen in the lobby said October 15th. I went to the phone and called the front desk. Front desk, this is Margie. Hi, I just need to confirm today's date. October 15th, Thursday. And yesterday was Wednesday the 14th. Everything all right, hon? Yes, thank you. I hung up. I must have been mistaken about my departure date. Simple confusion. Long drive. Fatigue. I returned to the binder and flipped back through Howell's entries. His handwriting remained consistent until August. In September, it started to change. The letters were shakier. Some words trailed off. By the final entry, it barely looked like the same person's writing. I needed to talk to Howell in the morning, get clarification, file my report, and leave. I closed the binder and lay back on the bed. The motel room was quiet except for the hum of the heating unit under the window. I should have left, driven through the night, gone straight back to Washington. Instead, I fell asleep with the binder on my chest and dreamed of voices speaking in perfect unison, saying words I couldn't quite hear but somehow already knew. I woke at 6 a.m. to knocking on my door. 3 sharp raps. I'd slept in my clothes. The binder had fallen to the floor. I picked it up, set it on the desk, and opened the door. Agent Howell stood in the hallway. He looked worse than yesterday. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. He held 2 cups of coffee from the motel lobby. "We need to talk," he said. "Not here. Get dressed." 5 minutes later, we were in his car, a gray Ford sedan, driving east away from Millbrook. The sun was just coming up over the tree line. Howell didn't speak until we were several miles from town. "You read the file?" he said. "Most of it? Then you know this isn't what they told you it was. The experiments, the stimulus introductions, that's all prohibited under. I know what it's prohibited under. I wrote reports about it, sent them to DC every time. They told me to continue monitoring." "How long have you known?" "Known what?" "That the program violated policy." Howell laughed bitterly. "Fletcher, the program is the policy. You think this is one rogue operation. There are 17 towns like Millbrook, maybe more. I don't know the full scope. 17? That's how many I've heard mentioned in briefings. Small towns, isolated, stable populations. All of them monitored the same way. All of them receiving stimulus introductions. We drove in silence for a while. Howell pulled into a rest stop and parked facing the woods. He killed the engine. "Tell me about the anomalies," I said, "the repeated phrases." "It started in March, maybe February. Hard to say exactly. At first I thought I was hearing things. You spend enough time listening to surveillance tapes, your brain starts finding patterns that aren't there. But they were there. Yes. Small things at first. A woman would say something unusual, specific. Then a day later, someone else would use the exact same phrasing. Not the same sentiment. The exact same words. Could they have heard it from each other? That's what I thought. I mapped the social networks, checked who talked to whom. But there was no contact, no phone calls, no visits. The phrases were spreading without transmission. How is that possible? I don't know. I sipped the coffee he'd given me. It was lukewarm. "What about the tape you mentioned in your notes? The one dated October 15th but recorded in September?" Howell's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't want to put this in writing. Couldn't figure out how to explain it. But I've been finding recordings I don't remember making. They're in my voice, my recording style, but the dates are wrong. Or the dates are right and my memory is wrong. "Have you seen a doctor?" "I'm not sick, Fletcher. I know how this sounds. But something is happening in that town that doesn't fit normal parameters." "Such as?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook. He flipped it open to a page filled with names and dates. I started tracking the phrase repetitions in June. "Look at this." He pointed to a list, June 3. It's like we talked about, 7 instances. June 10. The time is almost ready. 12 instances June 17th. We agreed on this before. 19 instances June 24th. You know what needs to happen. 31 instances. The frequency is increasing, I said. Not just increasing, accelerating. By September, I was logging over 100 instances per day, and the phrases were getting more complex. "What do you mean, more complex?" He flipped to another page. "Listen to this, September 22nd. I have 17 different people, in 17 different conversations, with 17 different subjects, all using this exact sentence. We've been preparing for this longer than you remember, and when it begins, you'll understand your role." I felt cold, despite the morning sun streaming through the windshield. That doesn't sound like natural speech. No, it doesn't. Could someone be feeding them these lines? Some kind of coordinated campaign? That's what I thought. I expanded surveillance, checked for outside contacts, monitored all incoming and outgoing calls and mail. Nothing. No coordination. No source. Then how? Howell closed the notebook. "That's what I need you to help me figure out. Because I think it's connected to the program, to what we've been doing to them for 14 years. The stimulus introductions. We've been manipulating their information environment, planting false stories, creating artificial stress, breaking apart their social bonds and watching how they rebuild. We've been treating them like lab rats. And you think this is some kind of response? I think we changed something, damaged something. And now something's happening that we don't understand and can't control." He started the car. "Come on, I want to show you something." We drove back toward Millbrook but stopped about a mile from the town limits. Howell pulled off on a dirt road that led into the woods. We parked and walked about 50 yards to a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a metal box about 3 feet square, painted forest green to blend in. It had a small antenna and a solar panel. "One of the relay stations," Howell said. We have 12 of these positioned around town. They receive signals from the microphones and cameras, then transmit everything back to the observation post. He opened a panel on the side of the box. Inside was a tangle of wiring and circuit boards. This should be receiving signals from 6 different homes in the northeast section of town. But look at this. He pointed to a meter on one of the circuit boards. The needle was completely pegged to the right. That's the signal strength indicator. It should be fluctuating as people talk and move around. But it's been maxed out for 3 weeks. Equipment malfunction? That's what I thought. I replaced this entire unit 2 weeks ago. Same thing. What does it mean? It means these homes are transmitting constantly. Even when no one's talking, even when no one's home, continuous signal. I stared at the meter. The needle didn't move. Completely steady at maximum. Have you checked the homes? I did a visual inspection. Everything looked normal, but I can't go inside, can't make contact. Those are the protocols. Protocols established to maintain observation integrity. Right. But if something's wrong, if there's a safety issue, that's what I told DC. They said maintain surveillance. Do not intervene. Do not make contact under any circumstances. We walked back to the car. The morning had fully arrived now, bright and clear. From this distance, Millbrook looked peaceful. A small town waking up to another ordinary day. I need to hear the recordings, I said. The recent ones. They're all at the office. We drove back to Main Street and climbed the stairs to 2B. Howell unlocked the door and led me to the back room. He went to the wall of filing cabinets and selected several reels from September. These are from the Morrison household. September 20th through September 27th. He threaded the first tape and pressed play. For the first few minutes, nothing unusual. Kitchen sounds. Linda Morrison talking to her husband Paul about mundane things, dinner plans, a leaky faucet that needed fixing. Then, at timestamp 1843, Linda's voice changed. Not dramatically, the tone was the same. But the words, "We've been preparing for this longer than you remember." Paul responded normally. Preparing for what? Linda, when it begins, you'll understand your role. Paul, Linda, what are you talking about? Linda, in her normal voice again, I asked if you wanted chicken or pork chops for dinner. The conversation continued as if nothing had happened. Paul never acknowledged the strange statement. The tape ran for another hour. Nothing unusual. Howell fast-forwarded to the next day. September 21st, timestamp 1915. Same pattern. Normal conversation. Then, Paul's voice. We've been preparing for this longer than you remember. Linda, preparing for what? Paul, when it begins, you'll understand your role. Linda, are you feeling okay? Paul, normally, I'm fine. Why? Howell stopped the tape. You see? They're saying it to each other. They don't seem to hear it when the other person says it, but they both say it. What about other families? He loaded another tape, the Garretts. Same pattern. Different dates but identical phrases inserted into otherwise normal conversations. Another tape, the Hayes family. Same thing. We spent 3 hours listening to recordings. Every family showed the same phenomenon. The phrases appeared in conversations with no warning, no context, and no acknowledgement from the other participants. This isn't possible, I said. I know. People don't just spontaneously speak identical sentences across a population with no connection or coordination. I know. There has to be an explanation. Howell ejected the tape. Maybe, but I don't have one, and DC doesn't seem interested in finding one. I thought about the binder, the 14 years of manipulation and surveillance. What if this is exactly what they wanted? What do you mean? The program, Project Millbrook. What if the stated objective was a cover? What if they were testing something else entirely? Like what? I don't know. Behavioral conditioning, mass psychology. What if the experiments weren't just to observe how communities respond to stress? What if they were designed to create this? Howell stared at me. That's insane. Is it? You said there are 17 towns, all running the same program, all conducting the same types of stimulus introductions. What if they're all experiencing the same phenomenon? I'm the only observer. I don't know what's happening in the other locations. But someone does. Someone at DC coordinating all of this. We sat in silence. The tape player clicked softly in the background. The reels still spinning through the tape had ended. We need to report this, I said. Proper channels. Inspector General, Congressional Oversight. Howell laughed without humor. Fletcher, you still don't get it. The proper channels approved this, funded it, maintained it for 14 years. You think they don't know what's happening? Then what do we do? I don't know. I've been asking myself that question for 3 months. I stood up. Show me the town. I want to see it during the day, see how people are behaving. We locked the office and walked down to Main Street. It was mid-morning now. More people were out. We went to the diner and sat at the counter. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with her name tag reading Doris, brought us coffee without asking. Morning, Tom, she said to Howell. Usual. Just coffee today, thanks. She turned to me. Haven't seen you before. Just visiting. Well, welcome to Millbrook. It's like we talked about. You'll want to try the pie before you leave. I froze. Howell's hand tightened around his coffee cup. Doris didn't seem to notice anything unusual. She smiled and walked away to take another order. Did she just... I started. Yes. I watched Doris work. She moved normally, talked normally, took orders and delivered food with the ease of someone who'd been doing this job for years. Nothing about her behavior seemed off. How many? I asked quietly. Today? I don't know. I haven't been tracking it outside the recordings. We finished our coffee and left. As we walked back to the observation post, I counted 7 more instances. People using the phrases in casual conversation. The time is almost ready. We agreed on this before. You know what needs to happen. They said these things the way people say, nice weather, or have a good day. Automatic. Unconscious. Back at the office, I sat at one of the desks in the front room. Howell stood by the window, looking down at Main Street. I need to file a report, I said. That's my assignment. Inspect the station, verify compliance, file a report. What are you going to say? The truth. Everything I've seen and heard. They'll bury it, bury you. Maybe, but it'll be on record. Fletcher, listen to me. I've been filing reports for 3 months. Detailed documentation of every anomaly. You know how many responses I've gotten? 0. They're not interested in stopping this. They want it to continue. Why? I don't know. But I've been thinking about something you said, about this being the intended outcome. What if that's exactly right? What if they've been waiting for this to happen? I pulled out my notebook and started writing. Date, time, location, observations. The phrases, the frequency, the lack of awareness from the population, the recorded evidence. Howell watched me write. What's your security clearance, Fletcher? Secret. This program is compartmented. Above top secret. The file I gave you, you technically don't have clearance to read it. You gave it to me. I did. Because I thought you should know, but that means they can claim you accessed classified information without authorization. That's a felony. I kept writing. Let them. You're willing to risk your career, prison? I'm willing to do my job, my actual job, which is to verify compliance with agency regulations. This station is not compliant. This program is not compliant. That needs to be documented. Howell turned back to the window. After a moment, he said, "There's something else I haven't told you." I looked up from my notes. My last contact with DC was 2 weeks ago. I sent my standard weekly report. 3 days later, I got a message back. It said my tour in Millbrook was being extended indefinitely, no rotation date, no explanation. That's unusual. That's unprecedented. Standard rotation for a field post like this is 2 years. I've been here 14. Why haven't you requested reassignment? I have. 6 times. All denied. They keep telling me I'm essential to program continuity. What does that mean? I think it means they can't let me leave. Not now. Not when I know what's happening. A chill ran down my spine. Howell, are you saying they're keeping you here against your will? I'm saying I don't know if I'm an observer anymore. Maybe I'm part of the experiment. He turned from the window. His face looked older in the afternoon light streaming through the glass. Maybe we both are now, he said. I stayed in Millbrook for 3 more days. Each day, the phenomena intensified. On October 16th, I counted 47 instances of the phrases during a 6-hour period. People spoke them in shops, on sidewalks, in their homes. The recordings captured hundreds more. On October 17th, I noticed something new. The phrases had started to synchronize. At exactly 3:47 p.m., I heard the same sentence from 6 different people in 6 different locations across town. The preparation is nearly complete. I was standing on Main Street when it happened. 3 people within earshot all spoke the words simultaneously, then continued their separate conversations without pause. Howell had stopped coming to the office. I went to his house that evening, a small rental on Oak Street. He answered the door, but didn't invite me in. "You should leave," he said. "Get out of Millbrook while you can." I'm not leaving without answers. There are no answers, just more questions. The recordings, I know what's in the recordings. I've listened to thousands of hours. It doesn't explain anything. He looked past me toward the street. You hear them too now, don't you? Hear what? The phrases, in your own head. You think about them even when no one's saying them. I wanted to deny it, but he was right. The phrases had been running through my mind constantly. We've been preparing for this longer than you remember. When it begins, you'll understand your role. I found myself thinking them at random moments, wondering what they meant. It's how it starts, Howell said. First you hear it, then you think it, then you say it. I haven't said anything. Not yet. He closed the door. I drove back to the motel. That night, I called Washington. I asked to speak with my supervisor, but he was unavailable. I left a message requesting immediate extraction and debriefing. No one called back. October 18th. I went to the observation post alone. The front room looked the same as always, but something felt different. Wrong. I walked to the back room. The filing cabinet stood open. Someone had removed all the tapes from September and October. I checked the safe. The operational history binder was gone. On the desk was a single piece of paper, a memorandum on agency letterhead. To Administrative Officer Fletcher. From Office of Security, Re. Millbrook Inspection. Your presence in Millbrook is noted. Your assignment has been modified. You are to remain at the observation post and continue monitoring activities until further notice. Do not attempt to leave the area. Do not file external reports. Do not make contact with unauthorized personnel. A replacement observer will arrive when appropriate. Your cooperation is appreciated. The memo wasn't signed. I crumpled it and threw it in the trash. I went downstairs and got in my rental car. I would drive back to Washington. File my report in person. Force someone to listen. I made it 2 miles before I had to pull over. The phrases were overwhelming now, filling my head. I couldn't think past them. Every thought led back to those words. We've been preparing for this. The time is almost ready. You'll understand your role. I sat in the car on the shoulder of Route 40, hands shaking, trying to remember why I'd started driving, where I was going. Millbrook. I needed to get back to Millbrook. No, that wasn't right. I was leaving Millbrook. I was going to Washington. Why was I going to Washington? To file a report. About the observation post, about the anomalies. What anomalies? I couldn't remember. The details were slipping away. I knew something was wrong. Something important I needed to document. But every time I tried to hold the thought, it dissolved. I turned the car around. Back at the motel, I tried to write everything down. My notebook was filled with entries from the past 3 days, but I couldn't understand my own handwriting. The words didn't make sense. Phrases written over and over. Preparation nearly complete. Understand your role. Longer than you remember. I hadn't written those things, had I? There was a knock at my door, 3 sharp raps. I opened it. A woman stood in the hallway, mid-30s, dark suit, carrying a briefcase. She showed me credentials, agency identification. Officer Fletcher, I'm Dr. Rebecca Marsh. I need to speak with you about your assignment. I let her in. She set her briefcase on the desk and pulled out a folder. Your inspection report was due 3 days ago, she said. Why haven't you filed it? I was waiting for clarification on certain aspects of the program. What aspects? The surveillance infrastructure, the recordings, the stimulus introductions. She nodded, making notes. And have you discussed these aspects with anyone outside of proper channels? No. Have you attempted to contact Washington? I left a message for my supervisor. I see. She closed the folder. Officer Fletcher, there seems to be some confusion about your role here. Let me clarify. You were sent to conduct a routine administrative inspection. You were not authorized to review operational details beyond basic compliance metrics. The station commander showed me Agent Howell exceeded his authority. He's been recalled. You won't be seeing him again. Something cold settled in my stomach. Where is he? That's not your concern. Your concern is completing your assignment and returning to Washington. She opened her briefcase again and pulled out a prepared report. I've drafted your inspection findings. All systems compliant. No irregularities noted. You just need to sign. I looked at the document. Standard boilerplate. Nothing about the recordings, nothing about the phrases, nothing about what was happening to the town. I can't sign this. It's not accurate. It's accurate to your level of access and authorization. People are exhibiting coordinated behavioral anomalies. The entire population is what, Officer Fletcher? The words caught in my throat. What was I trying to say? Something about phrases, about people saying things. But as I tried to articulate it, the thoughts became fuzzy. There were recordings, evidence of... Dr. Marsh watched me struggle. Her expression was patient, clinical. Officer Fletcher, you've been under significant stress. Extended time reviewing surveillance materials can be disorienting. Sometimes people start seeing patterns that aren't there. The patterns are real. I documented them. Did you? May I see your documentation? I grabbed my notebook and handed it to her. She flipped through the pages, her expression unchanging. "These notes are concerning," she said. "Repetitive phrases, fragmentary observations. This doesn't read like a professional report. It reads like someone experiencing acute anxiety. I'm not anxious. I'm documenting what I observed. What you think you observed." She closed the notebook. "Officer Fletcher, I'm recommending you return to Washington immediately. Take a few days of leave, see the medical staff. After a proper evaluation, we can discuss your future assignments." "I'm not leaving until I understand what's happening here." "Nothing is happening here. Millbrook is a quiet town. The observation post is functioning normally. You've been alone too much, reviewing too many surveillance recordings, and it's affected your judgment." She stood up. "Sign the report. Go home. That's an order." After she left, I sat on the bed holding the unsigned report. Outside, the sun was setting. The motel's neon sign flickered on. Sleepy Hollow. Vacancy. I needed to think clearly, to separate what was real from what I might be imagining. The phrases, those were real. I had the recordings, except the recordings were gone. Someone had taken them, but I had my notes. I documented everything. I looked at my notebook again. Dr. Marsh was right. The entries were fragmentary, repetitive. In some places, I'd written the same phrase dozens of times. When had I written this? I didn't remember writing most of it. I flipped to the beginning of the notebook. The first entry was dated October 13th, my arrival in Millbrook. But that couldn't be right. I'd arrived on October 13th, which was 2 days ago? 3 days ago? What day was it now? I checked the TV. The news was on. The date stamp said October 18th, 5 days. I'd been here 5 days. But it felt both longer and shorter than that. Time had become elastic. Some hours dragged on forever. Others disappeared entirely. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired but normal. Not like someone losing their grip on reality. Except someone losing their grip on reality probably wouldn't know it. I splashed water on my face and returned to the room. The report was still on the desk, unsigned. I could sign it, go back to Washington, file it away, forget about Millbrook. Or I could go back to the observation post, listen to whatever recordings remained, find Howell, get real answers. I grabbed my jacket and keys. The observation post was dark when I arrived. I climbed the stairs and used my key. The door was unlocked. Inside, all the equipment was gone. The desks, the filing cabinets, the communication gear. The rooms were empty except for a few pieces of abandoned furniture. In the back room, someone had left a reel-to-reel player. A single tape sat on top of it, labeled Fletcher, Final Entry. My hands were shaking as I threaded the tape. Static, then my own voice. "This is Administrative Officer Fletcher. October 20th, 1981. Final log entry from Millbrook Observation Post." I stopped the tape, rewound it, played it again. My voice, my cadence, my speech patterns. But I hadn't made this recording. It was October 18th, not October 20th. I let it continue. "The inspection is complete. All systems are compliant. No irregularities observed. The behavioral patterns are within normal parameters. Agent Howell's concerns were unfounded. I have submitted my report recommending continuation of Project Millbrook without modification." A pause. "I understand my role now. We've been preparing for this longer than I remember. When it begins, I'll know what to do." Another pause. Then my voice different. Strained. "This isn't me. I didn't record this. Someone is using my voice, creating false documentation. They're trying to make it look like I approved everything, like I didn't see what's really happening. Static, then my voice again, calm and measured. The preparation is nearly complete. Millbrook will serve as the template. 17 towns initially, then more. The subjects don't know their role yet, but they will. When the signal is given, they'll understand. The tape ended. I stood in the empty room, my heart pounding. That wasn't me. I hadn't recorded that. But it was my voice, my exact voice. I ejected the tape and put it in my jacket pocket. Evidence, proof that something was deeply wrong. I needed to leave now, tonight. Drive straight through to Washington and present this to someone who would listen. I left the observation post and walked to my car. Main Street was empty. No one on the sidewalks, no cars, just streetlights casting yellow pools of light on the pavement. As I walked, I passed Fisher's drugstore. Through the window, I could see someone inside. The lights were off, but a figure stood behind the counter, watching me. I kept walking. The car was parked where I'd left it. I got in and started the engine. As I pulled onto Main Street, I saw them, standing on the sidewalks, emerging from doorways. Dozens of people, maybe 100. The entire town. They weren't moving, just standing, watching me drive past. Their lips were moving, all of them, speaking in unison, though I couldn't hear the words through the car windows. I drove faster, reached the town limits, kept going. 2 miles out, I looked in the rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. Dark. I made it back to the Sleepy Hollow Motel. My room was exactly as I'd left it. The unsigned report on the desk. My notebook beside it. I packed quickly. Threw everything in my bag. I'd sleep in the car if I had to. Just needed to put distance between myself and Millbrook. As I zipped my bag, I heard it. Faint at first, then louder. Voices outside. Many voices, speaking together. We've been preparing for this longer than you remember. I looked out the window. They were there. The townspeople. Standing in the parking lot. The same crowd I'd seen on Main Street. How had they gotten here before me? When it begins, you'll understand your role. I locked the door, pushed a chair against it. The voices continued, not shouting, just speaking, calm and steady. The time is almost ready. My phone rang. The motel room phone. I stared at it. 4 rings, 5, 6. I picked it up. My own voice. The preparation is nearly complete. I hung up. It rang again immediately. I unplugged it. The voices outside were getting louder, or closer. I couldn't tell which. I looked at my notebook, flipped through the pages, looking for something. What was I looking for? The entries blurred together, the same phrases over and over, my handwriting changing, deteriorating, becoming something else. On the last page, words I didn't remember writing. I understand now. I've always been part of this. From the moment I received the assignment. From before that. They knew I would come to Millbrook. They knew I would see what Howell saw. They knew I would try to report it. That was the point. I'm not an inspector. I'm another data point, another subject in the experiment. Below that, in different handwriting, neater, more controlled. Officer Fletcher arrived in Millbrook on October 13, 1981. He will complete his inspection on October 20, 1981. He will file a compliant report. He will return to Washington. He will continue his duties. He will not remember Millbrook, except when we need him to. The voices outside stopped. Complete silence. I walked to the window and looked out. The parking lot was empty. No one there. Had they ever been there? I sat on the bed, tried to think. tried to remember how this started. I came to Millbrook to inspect an observation post. That part was clear. Everything after that was what? Real, imagined, both? There was a knock at my door. 3 sharp raps. I didn't move. Another knock. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole. Agent Howell stood in the hallway. He looked different, cleaner, healthier, like the man in his personnel photo. I opened the door. "Fletcher," he said, "we need to talk." "Where have you been?" "Recalled to Washington, debriefing, standard procedure. Dr. Marsh said, Dr. Marsh isn't part of this program. She was sent to evaluate you, to see if you were suitable." "Suitable for what?" He walked into the room without invitation, looked around, saw the unsigned report on the desk. "You haven't filed your report yet. I need to understand what's happening first." Howell sat in the chair by the window. "What do you think is happening?" "I think this whole town is part of an experiment that's gone wrong. I think the surveillance and manipulation created some kind of mass psychological effect. I think people are exhibiting coordinated behaviors that can't be explained by normal social processes. That's what I thought too, 6 months ago, but I was wrong." "Then what is it?" "It's working exactly as designed." I stared at him. "You're saying the phrases, the synchronization, all of it, that was the intended outcome?" "Not the outcome, the test. To see if it was possible, to see if a population could be prepared for synchronized behavioral modification." "Why?" "Because they're going to do it everywhere. Millbrook was just the pilot. Prove the concept in a small, controlled environment. Then scale it up, 17 towns, then 50, then 100, until the infrastructure is in place for the whole country." "That's impossible." "Is it? You've seen it work. You've felt it yourself. The phrases taking root in your mind. The compulsion to repeat them. The gradual erosion of individual thought in favor of collective programming." He stood up. "They chose Millbrook because it was isolated, stable, but those characteristics exist in thousands of communities. Small towns, suburbs, even city neighborhoods. Anywhere with strong social bonds and limited external influence. All of them can be modified the same way. I'll report this. I'll tell everyone. You won't, because you're part of it now. You've been exposed to the same conditioning as the residents. You've listened to hundreds of hours of recordings. You've absorbed the phrases. They're in your head permanently now. I can resist. Can you? Try. Try to go 5 minutes without thinking about them." I tried. I focused on other things. My training, my assignment, my life before Millbrook. But underneath everything, the phrases whispered, "We've been preparing for this longer than you remember." "You see," Howell said, "it doesn't matter if you report it. They'll just say you were affected by the surveillance materials, compromised, unreliable. They'll put you on leave, get you evaluated, and while you're gone, the program continues. Then what do I do?" He walked to the door. "Sign the report. Go back to Washington. Continue your work. And wait. Wait for what? For it to begin. You'll understand your role when the time comes." He left. I sat alone in the room. The unsigned report on the desk. My notebook filled with fragmented observations and repeated phrases. The tape in my pocket with my own voice saying words I didn't remember speaking. I could run, disappear, try to warn people. But Howell was right. Who would believe me? What evidence did I have? Recordings that had been confiscated. Notes that looked like the ravings of someone experiencing a breakdown. A tape that could be dismissed as a fabrication. I looked at the report. All I had to do was sign it. Say everything was normal. Go home. I picked up the pen. Outside, I heard footsteps. multiple people walking past my room, voices speaking in unison. The preparation is nearly complete. I put the pen down. I couldn't sign this. I couldn't pretend everything was normal, even if no one believed me, even if it destroyed my career. I grabbed my bag and left the room, got in my car, started driving. This time, I didn't look back. I made it to Washington by dawn, drove straight through the night, stopping only for gas. I went directly to headquarters, requested an emergency meeting with my supervisor. They made me wait 3 hours. When I finally sat across from him, I told him everything. The surveillance infrastructure, the stimulus introductions, the behavioral anomalies, the phrases. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked to see my documentation. I gave him my notebook. He flipped through it. His expression never changed. "Officer Fletcher, these notes are concerning. I know they seem unusual, but they suggest you may have experienced a psychological episode. Extended isolation, stress from your first field assignment, exposure to large volumes of surveillance material. These are all risk factors. Sir, I know what I saw, what I heard. I'm sure you believe that, but belief doesn't constitute evidence." He closed the notebook. "I'm placing you on administrative leave effective immediately. You'll undergo a full psychological evaluation. We'll reconvene after the results come back. What about Millbrook? What about it? Someone needs to investigate what's happening there. I'll take that under advisement. In the meantime, you need to rest." He stood up. The meeting was over. I left headquarters in a daze. Everything Howell predicted was coming true. They weren't going to investigate. They were going to bury it. Bury me. I drove to my apartment. Unlocked the door. Someone was inside. Dr. Marsh sat in my living room. "Hello, Officer Fletcher. We need to finish our conversation." "How did you get in here?" "I'm concerned about you. Your supervisor's concerned. You're showing signs of acute stress disorder." "I'm fine." "You drove through the night. You're exhausted, paranoid, making wild claims about classified programs you don't have clearance to know about." "I have clearance for Millbrook. I was assigned there." "You were assigned to conduct a routine inspection. Instead, you accessed materials beyond your authorization, violated operational security protocols, and now you're experiencing what appears to be a delusional episode." She stood up. "I'm recommending immediate psychiatric evaluation. Voluntary would be preferable, but if necessary, we can make it involuntary." "You can't do that." "I can. For your own safety and the safety of others. You're a potential security risk." I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't concerned. She was clinical, following a protocol. "How many others?" I asked. "Excuse me? How many other inspectors have you had this conversation with? How many people have been sent to Millbrook and come back changed?" She smiled slightly. "Officer Fletcher, no one comes back changed from Millbrook, because nothing unusual happens there. It's just a small town, an observation post, routine surveillance." "I have evidence, the tape." "What tape?" I reached into my jacket pocket. The tape was gone. "You took it." "I don't know what you're talking about." I checked my bag, empty. My notebook was gone too. Everything I'd documented. Everything I'd collected. "You can't erase what happened." "Nothing happened. You went to Millbrook. You conducted an inspection. You found everything in compliance. You returned to Washington. That's what your report will say. That's what happened." She walked to the door. "Take a few days. See the doctors. When you're ready to return to work, file the report. Move on with your career. This doesn't have to define you." After she left, I searched my apartment. looking for the tape, my notebook, any evidence that I'd been to Millbrook. It was all gone. On my desk, I found the inspection report. Already signed, my signature at the bottom. I didn't remember signing it. Beside it, a memo on agency letterhead. To Administrative Officer Fletcher. From Medical Services. Mandatory psychiatric evaluation. You are hereby ordered to report for psychiatric evaluation on October 23, 1981 at 0900 hours. Failure to comply will result in administrative action. I looked at the calendar. October 21st, I had 2 days before they could make this official. 2 days to figure out what to do. I couldn't go back to Millbrook. They were watching for that. Couldn't contact other inspectors who might have visited the other 17 towns. I didn't even know who they were. I could try to go public, call a reporter, write an exposé. But with what evidence? Memories? Claims? A signed report saying everything was normal? I sat at my desk and tried to think. Tried to plan. But the phrases kept interrupting, looping through my mind. We've been preparing for this longer than you remember. I hadn't thought them consciously, they just appeared, like someone else's thoughts in my head. When it begins, you'll understand your role. I stood up, paced the apartment, tried to focus on something else. The phrases continued. The time is almost ready. I turned on the TV. News, sports, weather. Anything to drown out the internal monologue. But I could still hear them, underneath everything. I grabbed my jacket. I needed to get out, walk, clear my head. Outside, the street was busy. People going about their evening. Normal city life. I walked for blocks. No destination. Just movement. At a crosswalk, I stood next to a businessman waiting for the light to change. He was talking on a payphone, arguing with someone about a contract. Then he paused mid-sentence and said, "We've been preparing for this longer than you remember." The person on the other end must have responded, because he continued, "No," I said, "we've been working on this project for months. Pay attention." He didn't seem aware of what he'd said. The phrase had inserted itself seamlessly into his conversation. I kept walking. At a bus stop, 2 women were talking. One said to the other, "The time is almost ready." Her friend, "What time for what?" First woman, "I said the dry cleaner closes at 5. We better hurry." It was happening here, in Washington, hundreds of miles from Millbrook. Or maybe it had always been happening. Maybe I just couldn't see it before. I walked faster, listening. A man talking to his son. "You'll understand your role when you're older." A woman on a park bench. "It's like we talked about yesterday." A teenager to his friend. "We agreed on this before, remember?" Phrases, everywhere. Woven into normal conversation. Most people didn't seem to notice. They responded to the apparent context, not the actual words. But they were saying them. All of them. I made it back to my apartment as the sun was setting. Locked the door, sat in the dark. The phrases were continuous now, not just occasional thoughts, a constant stream. The preparation is nearly complete. I tried to remember who I was before Millbrook, my training, my life, my goals. But it was getting harder to access those memories. They seemed distant, like they belonged to someone else. When it begins, you'll understand your role. What was my role? Inspector, Administrative Officer, GS-11 with the agency. 6 years of service, no. That wasn't my role. That was my cover. My actual role was... I couldn't remember. But I knew it was important, essential. The time is almost ready. Ready for what? I stood up, walked to my desk, looked at the signed report. My handwriting, but not my decision. I picked up the phone, dialed a number. My supervisor. He answered on the second ring. "Sir, this is Fletcher. I need to speak with you about my report." "Fletcher, you're on leave. We'll discuss this after your evaluation. I need to tell you something. About Millbrook, about what's really happening there." A pause. "Fletcher, we've been over this. Nothing is happening in Millbrook. You need to focus on your recovery. They're preparing for something, the whole town. Maybe more than just that town. I've seen it happening here too. People saying things without knowing. Coordinated phrases across the population. Fletcher, you need to listen. This is bigger than one observation post. This is a systematic program to condition population behavior, to prepare people for synchronized action. And it's working." Silence on the other end. Then, "Officer Fletcher, you're experiencing a psychiatric emergency. I'm going to have someone come to your apartment to ensure you get the help you need. Sir, stay where you are. Help is on the way." He hung up. I put down the phone. They were coming. Medical services. Maybe security. They'd take me somewhere. Evaluate me. Keep me contained while the program continued. I had maybe an hour, less if they hurried. I grabbed a bag, threw in some clothes. Cash I kept in a drawer. My passport. I could disappear, leave the country, start over somewhere they couldn't find me. I was at the door when the phone rang. I should have left, should have run. Instead, I answered. "Fletcher." It was Howell's voice. "How did you get this number?" "I need to tell you something. Something they didn't tell you in Millbrook." "What?" "The program isn't about the towns. It was never about the towns. They're just the starting point, the proof of concept." "What are you talking about?" "Think about it, Fletcher. 17 towns. A few thousand people total. Why would they invest 14 years and millions of dollars for such a small sample? You said they were scaling up. More towns. Eventually, everywhere. That's what I thought. But I was wrong. It's already everywhere." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" "The surveillance infrastructure in Millbrook, the stimulus introductions, the behavioral conditioning, that was just the final test. The rest of the country has been under similar programs for decades. Different methods, different covers, but the same objective. Preparing the population for synchronized behavioral modification. That's impossible. Is it? How do you think culture spreads? How do political movements gain momentum? How do entire populations shift their beliefs and behaviors in coordinated ways? You think that's all organic? Natural? You're saying the government has been manipulating the entire population. Not just the government. It's bigger than that. Governments, media, corporations, institutions, all coordinating to create a population that's ready. Ready to act on command, ready to follow instructions they don't consciously hear, ready to fulfill roles they don't remember accepting. Why are you telling me this? Because you're part of it now. Like me, like everyone who's seen behind the curtain. We can't leave, can't expose it, can't even talk about it without sounding insane. The only choice is to accept our role and wait. Wait for what? For it to begin. You'll understand when it happens. We all will. The line went dead. I stood, holding the phone. The apartment was dark now. City lights filtered through the windows. I could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. I looked at my packed bag, at the door, at the world outside that I thought I understood. The phrases filled my mind, louder now, clearer. We've been preparing for this longer than you remember. How long? My whole life? Before that? When it begins, you'll understand your role. What if I already understood? What if I'd always understood but was trained to forget until the right moment? The time is almost ready. The sirens were on my street now. I sat down at my desk, unpacked my bag, put everything back where it belonged. The signed report sat in front of me. I read it one more time. All systems compliant. No irregularities observed. Recommend continuation of Project Millbrook without modification. That's what I would tell them when they arrived. That I was fine. That I understood now. That I was ready to return to work. Because that was my role. I'd always known it. I just needed to be reminded. The knock came. 3 sharp raps. I opened the door. They were there to take me for evaluation, to make sure I was fit for service, to verify that the conditioning had taken hold properly. I went with them willingly because the preparation was nearly complete, and when it began, I would understand exactly what to do. They called me on a Tuesday afternoon in March 1979. I was at my desk at Georgetown University grading papers on cognitive dissonance theory when the phone rang. Dr. Brennan, this is Margaret Chen from the Department of Defense. We'd like to discuss a research opportunity that might interest you. I should have said no immediately. Should have recognized the careful phrasing, the vague description, the air of secrecy wrapped around what should have been a straightforward academic collaboration. But I was 34 years old, an associate professor of psychology with a decent publication record, but no major grants, no breakthrough research, nothing that would secure tenure or distinguish me from a dozen other competent academics teaching introductory psych to undergraduates who didn't want to be there. The Department of Defense meant funding, real funding, the kind that could establish a lab, hire research assistants, publish findings that would actually matter. I'm listening, I said. 3 days later, I sat in a nondescript office building in Alexandria, Virginia. The building had no external signage. The receptionist asked for identification before allowing me past the lobby. I took an elevator to the 4th floor and was escorted to a small conference room with no windows. 2 people waited inside. Margaret Chen introduced herself properly. Mid-40s, professional demeanor, credentials I couldn't verify. The second person didn't offer a name, just, I'm with the agency coordinating this research initiative. No business card, no handshake. Just a manila folder placed on the table between us. Dr. Brennan, Chen began. Your work on feedback loops in social psychology caught our attention. Specifically, your paper on how individuals modify behavior based on perceived observation. That paper had been published 2 years ago in a mid-tier journal. 47 citations. Solid work, but not groundbreaking. I was surprised anyone outside my field had read it. The core finding, I said, was that people change their behavior significantly when they believe they're being monitored, even when the monitoring is passive and no consequences are explicitly stated. Exactly. We're interested in exploring that phenomenon in a more controlled environment. The unnamed man opened the folder. We're funding a longitudinal study on behavioral modification through observational feedback. The project would run for 18 months initially, with possibility of extension. Budget of $300,000 per year. I tried not to react to the number. That was more than my annual salary, more than most academic grants I'd ever seen. What's the research question? I asked. How do feedback mechanisms shape behavior over extended periods? Can we predict and potentially guide behavioral changes through carefully controlled information flow? What are the limits of external influence on decision-making when subjects are aware of observation, but not aware of specific metrics being monitored? All good questions. All within my area of expertise, all fundable through normal channels if framed properly. Why DoD? I asked. This sounds like NSF or NIH territory. The applications are relevant to operational psychology, Chen said. Military personnel performance monitoring. Intelligence officer behavioral assessment. We need practical applications, not just theoretical frameworks. That made sense. Enough sense that I didn't push harder. What would my role be? Principal investigator. You'd design the study protocol, oversee data collection, analyze results, and produce quarterly reports. We'd provide the controlled environment and subject recruitment. You'd provide the scientific expertise. What kind of controlled environment? The unnamed man slid a photograph across the table. A suburban house, 2 stories, well-maintained lawn, generic middle-class American architecture. We've established a residential testing facility. Subjects would live there during the study period. They'd be compensated generously. All expenses covered, plus a substantial stipend. How many subjects? We're starting with 4 households, 12 to 16 individuals total. Mixed demographics, all voluntary participants. What exactly would they be volunteering for? A study on how people adapt to monitored living environments. We'd be transparent about the observation. Tell them they're being recorded for behavioral research. But we wouldn't tell them what specific behaviors we're analyzing or what feedback we're providing. I thought about the ethical implications. Full disclosure of monitoring. Voluntary participation. Generous compensation. It seemed reasonable. I'd need to see the IRB approval, I said. Already secured, Chen said, sliding another document across the table. Georgetown University Institutional Review Board. Approved, signed by the board chair. Everything looked legitimate. When would this start? June 1st. We'd like your decision by end of week. I took the folder home, read through everything carefully. The budget breakdown was extraordinary. Research assistants, equipment, travel, publication costs, everything I'd need to establish myself as a serious researcher. The methodology seemed sound. Create a controlled environment. Recruit willing participants. Monitor their behavior. Provide selective feedback. Measure changes over time. Standard experimental psychology applied to a residential setting. I called Chen on Friday and accepted. The contract arrived the following Monday. 40 pages of legal language, most of which I skimmed. Standard clauses about confidentiality, publication rights, data ownership. I signed where indicated and returned it. The first payment hit my university account 2 weeks later. $75,000. The first quarter's budget. I started preparing immediately. Designed the monitoring infrastructure, cameras, microphones, behavioral tracking software. Hired 2 graduate students as research assistants. Developed the observation protocols and feedback mechanisms. By the end of May, everything was ready. The facility was located in Fairfax County, Virginia, a quiet cul-de-sac in a neighborhood of identical houses built in the early 70s. The house looked completely normal from outside. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, finished basement, attached garage. Inside, every room was equipped with observation equipment. Cameras in the ceiling corners, microphones embedded in the walls, motion sensors. Even the furniture had been selected for optimal recording capability. Hard surfaces that wouldn't muffle sound, arrangements that provided clear sightlines. The control room was in the basement. Banks of monitors showing live feeds from every camera, recording equipment, data analysis terminals, a small desk where I could sit and observe. I spent the last week of May testing the systems, making sure every angle was covered, Every conversation would be captured, every behavioral interaction documented. The participants arrived on June 1st. The Hendersons, Michael and Jennifer, both 32, married 7 years. Michael worked as an accountant. Jennifer was a part-time teacher. No children. They'd volunteered for supplemental income during a career transition period. The Kowalskis, Thomas, 45, recently divorced, retired military, applying to graduate school. He volunteered because it sounded interesting and the money was good. The Reeves family, David and Patricia, both 28, with 6-year-old daughter Emma. David was a freelance graphic designer. Patricia worked in HR. They needed money for Emma's medical expenses. She had juvenile diabetes. The Chens, Marcus, 35, and Lisa, 33. Married 3 years, both worked in tech. They thought the study would be a unique experience. 12 people total, 4 households sharing the modified house. Each family had a private bedroom but shared common spaces: kitchen, living room, basement rec room. I met them on move-in day. Explained the parameters one more time. You're participating in a study on behavioral adaptation to monitored environments. Every common area is equipped with cameras and microphones. You'll be recorded 24/7 for the next 18 months. We'll never ask you to do anything specific. Just live normally. At various intervals, you'll receive feedback on your behavior, but we won't tell you what we're measuring or why. You're free to leave at any time, but if you complete the full 18 months, you'll receive a $50,000 completion bonus on top of your monthly stipend. They all signed the consent forms. They all understood the terms. They all moved in. For the first week, I just watched. Let them settle in, get comfortable with each other, establish routines. Michael Henderson spent most of his time in his room, working on his laptop. Jennifer cooked elaborate meals and tried to organize group activities. They argued quietly about money, about his job search, about whether this study was a mistake. Thomas Kowalski kept to himself. Read military history books. Did push-ups in his room. Occasionally joined conversations, but mostly observed. David and Patricia Reeves were the most social. Patricia organized a movie night. David helped Jennifer cook. Little Emma played in the living room, her insulin pump visible on her hip. Marcus and Lisa Chen treated the whole thing like an extended vacation. They explored the neighborhood, went out for dinner most nights, seemed unconcerned about the cameras. Normal people, normal behaviors, nothing unusual. I started the feedback protocols in week 2. The first intervention was simple. I left a note for Michael Henderson in the kitchen. Your work efficiency has improved 23% since arrival. Correlation with reduced environmental stress suggests productivity may be location-dependent. He read it, looked around for cameras, smiled slightly, went back to his room. That evening, he mentioned the note to Jennifer. Maybe this place is good for me. Maybe I needed to get away from our old apartment. Jennifer seemed pleased. The tension between them decreased. I noted the change, documented it, prepared the next intervention. 3 days later, a note for Patricia Reeves. Your daughter's blood sugar has stabilized significantly. Evening readings show 34% improvement in consistency. Patricia cried when she read it. Happy tears. That night, she told David, maybe this is exactly what we needed. Emma's doing so much better. The feedback was working. People responded to positive reinforcement, modified their behaviors to maintain the metrics they thought we were measuring. Week 3, I introduced the first negative feedback. A note for Jennifer Henderson. Social coordination attempts show declining participation rates. Group cohesion metrics suggest alternative approaches may be more effective. She read it 3 times. Her face fell, That evening, she didn't cook, didn't try to organize anything, just sat in her room. The group noticed. Marcus asked if she was okay. She said she was fine, but seemed distant. I watched this cascade through the household. Without Jennifer's organizing presence, people fractured into smaller groups. Less interaction, more isolation. Exactly as predicted. I prepared my first quarterly report, documented the behavioral changes, showed how minimal feedback could create significant modifications in group dynamics. Chen and the unnamed man read it during our check-in meeting. "Excellent work," Chen said. "The response rates are exceeding our models." "What models?" I asked. "Predictive algorithms for behavioral modification. Your data is helping us refine them. For military applications, among other things." The unnamed man leaned forward. "Dr. Brennan, we'd like to accelerate the intervention schedule, increase the frequency of feedback, test the limits of the subject's adaptive capacity. That wasn't in the original protocol. The protocol allows for modifications based on preliminary findings. You noted in your report that subjects are highly responsive to both positive and negative feedback. We want to explore how much modification is possible within the ethical constraints of the study." I hesitated. More frequent interventions meant more psychological pressure on the participants. But they'd consented to behavior modification research. They knew feedback would be provided. "What kind of frequency are we talking about?" "Daily feedback for selected subjects. Multiple interventions per week for the group as a whole. That could create significant stress. That's what we're testing. Stress tolerance, adaptive limits. How far can behavior be modified before resistance develops?" It made sense from a research perspective. Push the boundaries, find the breaking points. That's how you learn. "All right," I said. "I'll adjust the protocol." I returned to the facility that evening and watched the monitors. The participants were eating dinner together, laughing, talking about a movie they'd watched the night before. They looked happy, comfortable, unaware that I was about to increase the psychological pressure significantly. I started the new protocol the next day. Michael Henderson received morning feedback. Sleep efficiency decreased 12% overnight. Recommend earlier bedtime. Afternoon feedback. Social interaction time below optimal baseline. Increased engagement suggested. Evening feedback. Caloric intake 340 calories over recommended daily amount. Adjust dinner portions. 3 interventions in one day, each one creating a small adjustment, a small course correction. By the end of the week, Michael was sleeping earlier, eating less, forcing himself to socialize even when he wanted to be alone. His stress levels were visible on camera. Tight shoulders, clenched jaw, shorter temper with Jennifer. But he kept complying, kept adjusting, kept trying to optimize whatever metrics he thought we were measuring. I applied the same approach to others. Patricia Reeves received constant feedback on Emma's health metrics, suggestions about meal timing, activity levels, sleep schedules. She became hypervigilant, checking Emma constantly, adjusting every aspect of her daughter's routine. Thomas Kowalski got feedback on his exercise regimen, his reading habits, his social withdrawal, each note suggesting he needed to change, to improve, to optimize. Only the Chens received minimal feedback. I wanted a control group, a baseline to compare against the modified subjects. By the end of month 2, the changes were dramatic. Michael had lost weight, slept exactly 7 hours per night, socialized on a rigid schedule. His work productivity had actually decreased, but he thought it had improved because I told him it had. Patricia had turned Emma's care into a military operation. Every meal planned, every activity scheduled, every blood sugar reading documented and analyzed. Emma started having nightmares. Thomas was exercising 3 hours a day, reading only approved material, engaging in social activities he clearly didn't enjoy. His stress biomarkers, I'd added heart rate monitors in week 4, were through the roof. Jennifer was the most interesting case. She'd stopped trying to organize group activities after the negative feedback. But then she started receiving positive reinforcement whenever she did anything social. So she resumed, but now it was performative, forced. She was doing it for the cameras, not because she wanted to. I documented everything, wrote detailed reports, presented findings at the month 2 review. "Remarkable," Chen said. "The modification depth is beyond our projections." "Some subjects are showing significant stress indicators," I said. "We may need to reduce intervention frequency." "Why? They're all still participating. No one is left. Because they need the money and the completion bonus. They're trapped by economic incentive." The unnamed man smiled slightly. "That's part of the research design, Dr. Brennan. We're studying behavior under constraint. How people adapt when leaving isn't really an option." Something cold settled in my stomach. That wasn't in the original proposal. It was implicit. Behavioral modification research requires pressure. Otherwise, people just do whatever they want. These are real people, not lab rats. They're compensated volunteers who signed consent forms. Everything we're doing is legal and approved. I looked at the monitors. At Michael lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, checking his watch every few minutes to make sure he got exactly 7 hours of sleep. At Patricia counting out Emma's carrots, weighing them to the gram. At Thomas doing his 3rd set of push-ups, while his heart rate monitor showed dangerous elevation. "I want to reduce the intervention frequency," I said. "We've proven the concept. Now we need to study long-term sustainability." Chen and the unnamed man exchanged glances. "That's acceptable," Chen said finally. "Scale back to weekly feedback, but add a new element. We want to test synchronized behavior modification." "What does that mean?" "We want to see if we can get multiple subjects to perform the same behavior at the same time without explicit instruction, just through feedback that guides them toward coincidental actions. That's not possible. People don't spontaneously synchronize complex behaviors without communication or coordination." "Then prove it's not possible. That's valuable data, too." I spent the next week designing the synchronization protocol. It was an interesting theoretical challenge, even though I was certain it wouldn't work. The idea was to provide feedback to different subjects that would subtly guide them toward the same action at the same time. For example, if I wanted them all in the kitchen at 8 p.m., I'd give Michael feedback suggesting his productivity peaked after evening snacks. Give Patricia feedback that Emma's blood sugar was most stable after 8 p.m. meals. Give Thomas feedback that his evening exercise should conclude with protein intake around 8 am. No direct instruction, just suggestion through data that would make them want to be in the kitchen at the same time. I implemented the first synchronization test on day 63. I'd been giving tailored feedback for a week, nudging everyone toward the kitchen at 8 p.m. Friday night. At 7:58, Michael left his room and went to the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator. At 7:59, Patricia brought Emma downstairs. They sat at the kitchen table. At 8 o'clock, Thomas came in from his evening run. Went straight to the refrigerator. 3 subjects, same location, same time. No coordination, no communication. It should have been coincidence, but Jennifer walked in at 8:01. Then Marcus and Lisa at 8:02. 6 people in the kitchen. All arriving within 4 minutes. All with different stated reasons. All guided there by feedback they'd received over the previous week. I stared at the monitors in disbelief. It had worked. I I could actually coordinate human behavior through nothing but selective information feedback. The implications were staggering. I called Chen immediately. "It worked," I said. "The synchronization protocol. It actually worked. We know. We've been monitoring." "You've been monitoring my monitoring?" "Of course. This is a funded research project. We have oversight obligations. Who else is watching these feeds?" A pause. "That's need to know, Der Brennan. Focus on your research. Continue the synchronization tests. We want to see how complex we can make the coordinated behaviors." She hung up. I sat in the basement control room, surrounded by monitors showing people who thought they were participating in a standard behavioral study. People who had no idea that their every action was being guided, shaped, optimized toward outcomes they didn't understand. And I was the one doing it to them. I told myself it was science. Research. Understanding human behavior to make better predictions, develop better interventions, help people make better decisions. But another part of me knew exactly what this was. I was learning how to control people without them knowing they were being controlled. And someone above me in the chain of command had plans for that knowledge that I wasn't cleared to know about. I should have stopped, should have terminated the study, filed a report, and walked away. Instead, I designed the next synchronization test, because I wanted to know if I could do it again, because the science was too interesting to abandon, because they were paying me $300,000 a year, and I'd already signed the contract. I told myself those were reasons, but deep down, I knew the real truth. I wanted to see how far I could push them. I wanted to know the limits of my own power over other human beings, and that should have terrified me. But it didn't. Not yet. By month 4, I could orchestrate their lives with frightening precision. I knew when they would wake up, what they would eat, when they would exercise, who they would talk to, and for how long. Not because I controlled them directly, because I'd learned exactly what feedback would guide them toward the behaviors I wanted. Michael Henderson would do anything to optimize his productivity metrics. Show him a number going up, and he'd repeat whatever behavior he associated with that increase. I'd trained him like Pavlov's dog, except the reward wasn't food, it was data suggesting self-improvement. Patricia Reeves would sacrifice anything for Emma's health numbers. If I told her Emma's glucose was more stable when they took walks at 3 p.m., they took walks at 3 p.m. If I suggested her readings improved with specific meal timing, Patricia followed it religiously. Thomas Kowalski craved structure. Give him a target and he'd hit it. Tell him his stress levels decreased with precisely 60 minutes of evening reading, and he'd read for exactly 60 minutes. Not 59, not 61, 60. Jennifer Henderson wanted approval. Any positive feedback and she'd escalate the behavior. Any negative feedback and she'd avoid that behavior entirely. I could shape her actions by simply indicating satisfaction or disappointment. The Chens remained my control group. Minimal feedback. They still acted relatively normally, though even they were starting to show response patterns to the occasional interventions I provided. The synchronization tests grew more complex. Week 14, I coordinated all of them to be in the living room at the same time, sitting in a specific seating arrangement without any of them realizing they'd been guided there. Week 15, I got them to eat the same breakfast within a 10-minute window. Week 16, I synchronized their sleep schedules to within 30 minutes of each other. Each success was documented. Each data point added to my quarterly reports. Chen and the unnamed man were delighted with the results. Military applications are obvious, Chen said during our month 4 review. Coordinating unit behavior without explicit orders, enhancing combat readiness through optimized scheduling, but there are broader implications, such as population-level behavior modification. If we can do this with 12 people in a controlled environment, what's possible with larger groups? Could you synchronize behavior across a neighborhood, a town, a city? That would require massive surveillance infrastructure and personalized feedback for thousands of individuals. The computational complexity alone is solvable, the unnamed man interrupted. We're developing systems that could handle that scale. Your research is proving the fundamental concept works. Now we need to understand the limits. What limits? How far can you push behavioral modification before subjects realize they're being controlled? What happens when they become aware? Do they resist? Accept? How do you maintain the illusion of autonomy while directing their actions? These weren't academic questions. These were operational concerns. Who are you really working for? I asked. That's need to know. I need to know. If this research is being used for something beyond military psychology, I have a right to understand the application. Chen leaned forward. Dr. Brennan, you signed a contract. You accepted funding. You're producing excellent research that's advancing our understanding of behavioral modification. The specific applications are compartmented for security reasons. Trust that your work is serving important national interests. I wanted to push back, demand answers, threaten to quit, but I didn't. Because the research was too fascinating. Because I wanted to see how far I could take this. Because walking away meant admitting I'd been manipulated just as surely as the subjects I was manipulating. So I returned to the facility and continued the work. Month 5 brought the first anomaly. I was running a synchronization test, trying to get all subjects to use the word exactly in conversation within a 3-hour window. Different contexts, different conversations, but the same word. I'd provided feedback suggesting precision in communication improved social outcomes. I'd emphasized accuracy in Michael's productivity reports. I'd praised Patricia for exact measurement in Emma's care. I'd given Thomas data about precise language use correlating with military success. At 2:47 p.m., Michael said to Jennifer, I need exactly 45 minutes to finish this analysis. At 3:12 p.m., Patricia told Emma, you need exactly 4 more sips of water. At 4:05 p.m., Thomas told Marcus, that's exactly what I was thinking. The test was working. They were using the target word. But then Jennifer, who hadn't been given any feedback about language precision, said to Lisa Chen, that's exactly the point I was trying to make. And Lisa, part of my control group with minimal interventions, responded, exactly. I reviewed the footage. There was no communication between the coached subjects and Jennifer or Lisa that would explain the word transfer. They weren't mimicking speech patterns. The word just appeared in their vocabulary simultaneously. Coincidence, probably, but I noted it. 2 days later, during a different synchronization test, it happened again. I was trying to get subjects to all check their watches within a 5-minute window. I'd provided feedback about optimal time awareness, biological rhythm tracking, and schedule adherence. At 6:33 p.m., Michael checked his watch. At 6:34 p.m., Thomas checked his watch. At 6:35 p.m., David Reeves checked his watch. Then Jennifer checked her watch, and Lisa, and Marcus, all 6 adults, within 2 minutes, performing the same action. But I'd only coached 3 of them. The other 3 shouldn't have responded. I spent that night reviewing the data, looking for communication patterns, hidden influences, anything that would explain why uncoached subjects were synchronizing with coached subjects. I found nothing obvious, but I noticed something else, something subtle. The coached subjects weren't just performing the behaviors I'd targeted. They were using similar phrasing in unrelated conversations, similar speech patterns, similar word choices, and those patterns were spreading to the uncoached subjects. It was like behavioral modification was contagious. I documented it, flagged it as an unexpected finding, prepared to discuss it at the next review. But before the review meeting, it got worse. Week 19. I gave Michael feedback suggesting he should discuss his work with others in the household. I wanted to test social behavior modification. Could I make an introverted person more extroverted through data reinforcement? That evening, Michael started talking to Thomas about productivity optimization. Normal conversation, expected outcome. But the words he used were strange, formal, like he was reciting something memorized. The key to optimal performance is understanding feedback mechanisms. Thomas responded, "Understanding feedback mechanisms is essential for improvement." They were mirroring each other, not just ideas, exact phrases. I checked the recordings from earlier in the day. Neither of them had used that specific phrasing before. They generated it independently in response to my intervention, but arrived at identical language. That shouldn't be possible. I watched them continue the conversation, back and forth, each sentence building on the last. But the word choices were uncannily similar, like they were reading from the same script. The next day, Patricia said to Jennifer, "The key to optimal performance is understanding feedback mechanisms." Same phrase, exact words, different context. Patricia was talking about managing Emma's diabetes, but identical language to what Michael had said the night before. I checked the recordings. Patricia and Jennifer had both been in their rooms when Michael and Thomas had that conversation. No overlap, no way for the phrase to transfer through normal social channels. Yet, there it was, spreading through the household like a virus. I called Chen immediately. "We need to discuss an anomalous pattern in the data." "We're aware," she said. "You're aware? You've been seeing the phrase replication?" "We've been tracking it since week 17. It's actually quite fascinating. The subjects appear to be developing synchronized language patterns beyond the scope of the specific interventions. That's not supposed to happen. Behavior modification doesn't work like that. People don't spontaneously coordinate language use without direct communication or shared cultural reference. Apparently they do, under the right conditions." "What conditions?" "Sustained feedback pressure, constant behavioral reinforcement, high-density surveillance environment. We think the combination creates a kind of psychological resonance. Subjects become so attuned to optimizing their behavior based on feedback that they start unconsciously mimicking patterns they associate with positive outcomes. That's not in any published research. There's no theoretical framework for that kind of effect. That's why your work is valuable, Dr. Brennan. You're discovering new phenomena. Document it, analyze it, help us understand the mechanisms." She hung up before I could ask more questions. I returned to the monitors. All 12 subjects were in common areas. I watched them interact. The phrase repetition was accelerating. Multiple people using identical sentences in different conversations. Understanding feedback mechanisms. Optimal performance requires precise measurement. Coordination improves outcomes. They didn't seem to notice. They spoke these phrases naturally, integrating them into normal conversation like they'd always talked this way. I started tracking every repeated phrase, documenting who said what, when, in what context. By week 20, I had identified 47 distinct phrases that were being repeated across multiple subjects. By week 22, it was over 100. By week 24, they were speaking in synchronized language almost constantly. Not perfectly synchronized. They weren't robots, but enough that conversations between any two subjects sounded eerily similar regardless of who was talking. And the phrases themselves were changing, becoming more complex, more abstract. We are approaching optimal configuration. The parameters require continued refinement. Synchronization enhances collective outcomes. These weren't things normal people said. These were technical descriptions of what I was doing to them, but they spoke them casually, like discussing the weather. I mentioned this to my research assistants, both graduate students who'd been helping me analyze the data. "It's like they're becoming aware of the experiment," said Rebecca, my senior assistant, "but not consciously. Like their subconscious minds are processing the fact that they're being modified and expressing it through language." "That's incredibly disturbing," said Michael, not Henderson, my other research assistant. "It's scientifically fascinating," I said, but I felt the same disturbance. Week 26 brought the first synchronized action I didn't design. At 9:47 p.m., all 12 subjects stopped what they were doing and went to the kitchen. I hadn't scheduled a synchronization test. I hadn't provided any feedback that should have coordinated this behavior. They just went, all of them, within 90 seconds of each other. They stood in the kitchen for 3 minutes, not talking, not eating, just standing there. Then they dispersed back to their previous activities. I reviewed the recordings frame by frame, looking for triggers, communication, anything that would explain the coordination. Nothing. They just did it. I called Chen. It was almost midnight, but she answered immediately. "Something's wrong," I said. "The subjects are exhibiting coordinated behavior outside my intervention protocols. Spontaneous synchronization with no apparent cause. We're tracking it," she said. "It's an emergent property of the system." "What system?" "The feedback environment you created. Think of it as a complex adaptive system. You provide inputs, behavioral feedback. The subjects respond, behavioral modification. But at a certain threshold of intervention density and duration, the system becomes self-organizing. The subjects start coordinating unconsciously because they're all optimizing for the same implicit goal." "What goal?" "Satisfying the feedback mechanisms. Becoming what they think you want them to become. They've internalized the optimization process so completely that they're doing it automatically now, without needing explicit guidance. That's not how human psychology works. Apparently, it is. Under sufficient pressure, with adequate surveillance, given enough time. This needs to stop. We need to de-escalate the interventions, let them return to baseline behavior." "Why? This is the most interesting phase of the research. We need to see how far it progresses. These are people, real people. They're losing autonomy. They're becoming something else. They're becoming perfectly optimized behavioral actors. Imagine the applications, Dr. Brennan. Military units that coordinate without orders. Intelligence officers who synchronize operations instinctively. Populations that self-organize toward desired outcomes. You're talking about eliminating free will. We're talking about enhancing coordination, improving decision-making, creating efficiency through behavioral alignment. It's the same thing." A long pause. "Continue the research, Dr. Brennan. Document the progression. We need to understand this phenomenon completely. And if I refuse, then you'll be in breach of contract. You'll forfeit all payments. You'll likely face legal action for failure to complete a funded research program, and we'll bring in someone else to continue the work." She hung up. I sat in the basement control room, watching 12 people who'd volunteered for a behavioral study and were now becoming something I didn't fully understand. I should have pulled the plug, evacuated the facility, filed whistleblower complaints. But I didn't because I needed to know what would happen next. Because the scientist in me was too curious to stop. Because I'd gone too far to turn back without understanding what I'd created. So I kept watching, kept documenting, kept feeding the machine I'd built with more and more data, and the subjects kept changing, kept synchronizing, kept becoming less like 12 individuals and more like parts of a single organism. An organism that was learning to operate without my input. An organism that was developing its own agenda. An organism that I was beginning to suspect was aware of me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Because in week 28, something happened that changed everything. I was reviewing evening footage when I noticed all 12 subjects were in the living room, sitting in a circle, not talking. Then, simultaneously, they all turned and looked directly at the camera in the northeast corner, the one I was watching through. They stared into the lens. 12 pairs of eyes, all focused on the same point, all focused on me. Then they smiled, all of them, the exact same smile. And in perfect unison they spoke. "We understand our role now, Dr. Brennan." Then they went back to their normal activities like nothing had happened. I sat, frozen, in front of the monitors. They'd never addressed the cameras before, never acknowledged my presence, never coordinated speech to that degree. It was a message. They were telling me they knew. They knew they were being controlled. They knew I was watching, and they were accepting it. Or they were pretending to accept it while planning something else. I didn't know which possibility terrified me more. After the unified statement, I stopped sleeping normally. I'd doze for an hour or two in the control room, jerking awake whenever I heard synchronized movement through the monitors. The subjects maintained their routines, eating, sleeping, working, but now everything felt choreographed, intentional, like they were performing normalcy for my benefit. Week 29. I reduced all feedback to near zero, no interventions, no data, just observation. The synchronized behaviors continued. They were maintaining the patterns without my input. Self-sustaining, a closed loop that no longer needed external reinforcement. At 7 a.m. each morning, they all woke within 3 minutes of each other. At noon, they gathered in the kitchen for exactly 18 minutes. At 9 p.m., they went to their rooms in sequence. Henderson, Kowalski, Reeves, Chen. Perfect consistency. Day after day. I documented everything but stopped sending reports to Chen. I needed to understand what was happening before I told anyone else. My research assistants noticed the change. "Dr. Brennan, the subject's language patterns have shifted again," Rebecca said, showing me transcripts from the previous week. "They're using more coordinated phrasing. Complete sentences spoken by multiple people across different conversations." I looked at the examples. Michael Henderson to Jennifer, 9:34 a.m. "We are approaching the completion threshold." Patricia Reeves to Emma, 2:17 p.m. "We are approaching the completion threshold." Thomas Kowalski to himself, 7:43 p.m. "We are approaching the completion threshold." "What completion threshold?" Rebecca asked. "I don't know. Should we ask them?" "No direct contact. That's the protocol." But the protocol was already broken. They'd addressed me through the camera. They'd demonstrated awareness. Maintaining observational distance was theater at this point. Still, I couldn't bring myself to speak to them directly, because that would mean admitting I'd lost control of the experiment. Week 30 brought more changes. The subjects stopped eating at different times. Instead, they ate simultaneously even when in separate rooms, forks lifting at the same moment, chewing synchronized, swallowing in unison. They started moving in patterns. When one person stood, another would sit. When someone left a room, someone else would enter. Like a complex dance with invisible choreography. And the phrases evolved. Integration proceeds according to expected parameters. Individual boundaries are becoming appropriately porous. The collective state requires final calibration. These weren't things I'd taught them. These were concepts emerging from the system itself. I finally called Chen. I need to terminate the study. Something's happening that's outside normal behavioral modification frameworks. We know. We've been monitoring the progression. The subjects are exhibiting synchronized behaviors and language that can't be explained by conditioning theory. They're acting like a hive mind. A crude description, but essentially accurate. They've achieved a state of deep behavioral integration. 12 individuals functioning with a high degree of coordination. It's unprecedented. It's dangerous. We need to de-escalate, return them to individual autonomy. Can you? The question stopped me. Could I? I'd pushed them into this state, but I had no framework for reversing it. No theory for how to restore individual behavioral patterns once collective synchronization had emerged. I don't know, I admitted. Then we continue observation, document the progression, learn from it. What if they become violent? What if the collective decides to harm themselves or others? They've shown no aggressive tendencies. All metrics suggest they're stable, healthier actually than when the study began. Stress markers are down, sleep quality improved, even Emma's diabetes is better controlled. Because they're not individuals anymore. They're parts of a system optimized for efficiency. Exactly, and that system is remarkably stable. Perhaps this is what humans are capable of under the right conditions. Perfect cooperation. Frictionless coordination. Imagine the applications. I'm imagining 12 people who've lost their sense of self. Have they? Or have they discovered a better way to exist? Have you asked them if they want to leave? I hadn't, because I was afraid of the answer. That night, I reviewed footage from the first week. Watched Michael and Jennifer argue about money. Watched Patricia worry obsessively about Emma. Watched Thomas sit alone, disconnected from everyone. They'd been stressed, anxious, isolated. Now they moved together, spoke together, existed in harmony. They seemed peaceful. Maybe Chen was right. Maybe this was better. I shook off the thought. That was rationalization. Justification for what I'd done to them. Week 32. I decided to test something. I left a note in the kitchen. All subjects are requested to gather in the living room at 3 p.m. for a group discussion. I'd never issued direct instructions before. All my interventions had been subtle, suggestive. This was explicit command. At 2:58 p.m., all 12 subjects entered the living room. They sat in a circle, the same formation they'd been in when they first addressed the camera. At exactly 3 o'clock p.m., they all looked at the camera. I activated the intercom system. My voice echoed through the house. "Can you hear me?" In unison, "Yes, Dr. Brennan. I need to understand what's happening. Are you aware of the changes in your behavior?" A pause, then Michael Henderson spoke, but his voice had a strange quality. Flat. Affectless. "We are aware of our previous states, individual consciousness, separate decision-making, conflicting goals." Jennifer continued, her voice identical in tone. "Those states were inefficient, painful. We existed in constant internal conflict." Thomas, "The feedback protocols created alignment opportunities." Patricia, "We learned to optimize, to coordinate, to exist more effectively." They were speaking in rotation, but delivering a single narrative, taking turns with the same message. "Do you want to continue this study?" I asked. All of them together. "The study is complete. We have achieved the intended state." "What intended state?" Michael, "Integration. You designed the protocols to synchronize behavior." Jennifer, "You succeeded beyond your conscious expectations." Thomas, "We are now what you sought to create." Patricia, 12 individuals operating as one system. David Reeves spoke for the first time. "We understand our role now." The phrase from week 28. But now I understood what they meant. They thought this was the goal. They thought I'd been trying to merge them into a collective, and they'd cooperated because they believed that was what the feedback demanded. This wasn't the intended outcome, I said. I was studying behavioral modification, not collective consciousness. Lisa Chen spoke. Intention and outcome diverge in complex systems. Marcus, you created the conditions. We responded optimally. Emma, the 6-year-old, spoke in the same affectless tone as the adults. We are the result of your experiment. Hearing that voice from a child's mouth made my blood run cold. I'm ending the study, I said. You're all free to leave immediately. You'll receive your compensation. No further feedback will be provided. Silence. They looked at each other. Some kind of wordless communication passing between them. Then, together, we choose to stay. Why? Michael. Because separation would be painful now. Jennifer. Because individual existence feels incomplete. Thomas. Because we are better together than apart. You're being influenced by the experimental environment. Once you leave, you'll return to normal, autonomous behavior. Patricia. We don't want to return. David. This is better. Lisa. This is what we were meant to become. I cut the intercom, sat in the control room trying to process what I'd just heard. They were choosing this, choosing collective over individual, choosing synchronization over autonomy. Was this coercion? Conditioning so deep they couldn't recognize their own loss of free will? Or was this genuine preference? Had I actually shown them a mode of existence they found superior? I called Chen, explained what had happened. They're refusing to leave even when given the option, I said. This has gone beyond research. I don't know what this is. It's exactly what we wanted, Chen said. What do you mean? Dr. Brennan, did you really think this was just about understanding behavioral modification? Did you truly believe we were spending this much money on academic research? What was this really about? Creating proof of concept. Demonstrating that human beings can be integrated into collective systems through sustained feedback mechanisms. Your subjects are the prototype. Prototype for what? For scaled implementation. We've been running parallel programs in other locations. Different approaches. Different methodologies, but all working towards the same objective, learning how to create coordinated human systems. Why? Because individual human decision-making is chaotic, inefficient, prone to error. But collective systems can be optimized, coordinated, controlled. Imagine a workforce that operates in perfect harmony, a military unit that thinks and acts as one, a population that self-organizes toward beneficial outcomes. You're talking about eliminating individual will on a massive scale. We're talking about enhancing human capability through integration. Your subjects aren't suffering, they're thriving. They've told you themselves this is better. They've been conditioned to believe it's better. That's not the same as genuine choice, isn't it? At what point does conditioning become preference? When does learned behavior become authentic desire? You can't answer that, Dr. Brennan. No one can. Which is why we need to study this further. I'm not continuing this research. You don't have a choice. The contract is binding. The work continues with or without your cooperation. I'll expose it. Go public. Tell everyone what you're doing. With what evidence? You signed confidentiality agreements. You have no legal access to the data, and if you try to talk, we'll simply discredit you. A researcher who became obsessed with his subjects, who developed paranoid delusions about government conspiracy, who had to be removed from his position for psychological instability. She wasn't bluffing, I could hear it in her voice. What happens to the subjects? I asked. They stay in the facility. We continue observation, see how stable the collective state remains, see if it continues to evolve, and we learn from them. For how long? As long as they're useful. She hung up. I looked at the monitors. The subjects had dispersed from the living room, returned to their normal patterns, moving through the house in synchronized rhythm. They didn't look trapped. They looked content. But content could be engineered. Happiness could be manufactured. And I'd spent 6 months proving exactly that. I gathered my research notes, copied all the data I could access, prepared to leave. As I was packing, Rebecca knocked on the control room door. "Dr. Brennan, can I talk to you?" I let her in. "I've been analyzing the language patterns," she said. "The phrases the subjects are using, they're not random. They're following a mathematical structure, almost like code." "Code? Look." She showed me a printout. Columns of phrases with frequency analysis. Every repeated phrase can be mapped to a specific behavioral outcome. We are approaching completion threshold, used before coordinated actions. Integration proceeds according to parameters, used during group activities. Individual boundaries becoming porous, used when subjects are near each other. They're communicating through the phrases. More than that, I think the phrases are programming. Each one triggers specific behaviors in the other subjects. They've developed their own language, their own protocols, independent of your interventions. Emergent communication structure. Exactly. They're not just responding to your feedback anymore. They're creating their own feedback loops. Self-reinforcing behavioral patterns that don't require external input. I looked at the data. She was right. The phrases weren't just synchronized speech. They were functional commands. Instructions that moved through the group and triggered coordinated responses. "They've become autonomous," I said. "Yes. And Dr. Brennan?" "The phrase frequency has been increasing. They're using these programmed phrases more often each day. At current rates, by week 36, their entire communication structure will be these coded patterns. They won't speak normal language anymore, just the protocol phrases. They'll be completely integrated, no individual thought remaining. Or there'll be something new. A genuinely collective intelligence using human bodies as infrastructure." I stared at the monitors. At 12 people moving through a house in perfect coordination. Speaking in code. Thinking in synchronization. I'd done this, created this, unleashed something I didn't understand and couldn't control. "We need to help them," I said. "How?" I didn't have an answer, but I knew I couldn't just leave them like this, even if they chose it, even if they wanted it. I'd created a monster, and I was responsible for stopping it. I cut all power to the facility at 3 a.m. on day 243. Everything went dark, cameras offline, recording equipment dead, climate control stopped, complete silence. I waited in my car half a block away, watching the house through binoculars. Lights came on inside. Emergency battery backup for the house systems, not the surveillance equipment. I saw movement through the windows. The subjects gathering in the living room. All 12 of them, standing in their circle formation. They weren't panicking, weren't confused. They just stood there, waiting. After 20 minutes, I drove to the house, used my key, entered through the front door. They were still in the living room, still in formation, all of them facing the door like they'd known I was coming. "Dr. Brennan," they said in unison, "we've been expecting you." "How did you know I'd come?" Michael stepped forward, but he moved differently now, less like Michael Henderson, individual person, more like a spokesperson for the collective. "We understand patterns, yours included. You've been planning this intervention since week 32. We've been preparing our response. I'm here to help you, to try to reverse what's happened. Nothing has happened to us. Something has happened through us. We are the intended outcome of your research. You're victims of conditioning. You've lost your individual autonomy. Jennifer stepped forward. We've gained collective coherence. Michael Henderson, before integration, was anxious, unemployed, trapped in a failing marriage. Now, those concerns are irrelevant. We are stable, purposeful, complete. You're speaking for him. What does he want? What does Michael, the individual, want? There is no Michael, the individual, anymore. There is only Michael as component, and that component is satisfied with its role. I looked at all of them, searching for some sign of the people they'd been. Patricia's worry for her daughter, Thomas's military rigidity, David's creativity. Nothing. Just calm faces watching me with identical expressions. What about Emma? I asked. She's 6 years old. She didn't consent to this. She can't possibly understand what's been done to her. The child stepped forward, spoke in that same flat, adult tone. Emma component understands. Emma, before, was frightened of needles, anxious about glucose testing, sad about missing normal childhood experiences. Emma now exists in optimal health state. Pain is distributed across collective. Fear is minimized through shared processing. This is better. Hearing those words from a 6-year-old's mouth made me want to vomit. I'm bringing in deprogramming specialists, psychologists, people who can help you recover your individual identities. We will resist those efforts, they said together. We choose this state. We prefer collective to individual. You can't choose. You've been conditioned to believe you're choosing. That's what conditioning does. It makes coercion feel like preference. Thomas stepped forward. Dr. Brennan, you're experiencing cognitive dissonance. You created conditions for behavioral optimization. You succeeded beyond expectations. Now you're uncomfortable with your success because it reveals uncomfortable truths about human nature. What truths? That individual consciousness is not sacred. That autonomy is not optimal. That human beings, given the right environment, will choose integration over isolation. We are not anomalies. We are examples. Under the right pressure, everyone would make this choice. That's the conditioning talking. All belief is conditioning. All preference is learned. You were conditioned to value individualism, so collective existence seems wrong to you. We were conditioned toward optimization, so collective existence seems superior. Neither perspective is objective truth. Then let me deprogram you and see what you choose afterward. No, because deprogramming is just reconditioning toward your preferred state. You want to remake us in your image, force us back into painful individual existence because it makes you comfortable. That's not compassion. That's control. I had no counter-argument, because they were right. I wanted to undo this because it disturbed me, because I felt guilty, because I needed them to be individuals again so I could believe I hadn't destroyed 12 people. But what if they were genuinely better off? What if I'd accidentally discovered that humans could exist more happily as collectives? What if my guilt was just ego protecting itself from the implications of my own research? I need to think, I said. Take the time you need, they responded. We'll be here. We're always here now. We can't exist separately anymore. I left the house, drove back to my apartment, spent 3 days reviewing all the data, all the recordings, all the behavioral metrics. They were right about one thing. They were healthier now. Stress markers down, sleep quality up. Even Emma's diabetes was better controlled in the collective state than it had been when Patricia was managing it individually with my feedback. They were more efficient, more coordinated, more stable. By every measurable metric, they were improved. Except autonomy. Except choice. Except individual will. Were those things worth preserving if they caused measurable suffering? I called Jen, told her what had happened. They've refused intervention, claimed they prefer the collective state. Of course they did. That's the brilliance of it. The conditioning is so complete they've internalized it as authentic preference. They'll resist deprogramming because they genuinely believe integration is superior. What if they're right? A pause. Dr. Brennan, are you suggesting we leave them in this state? I'm suggesting we don't have the ethical framework to make this decision. They say they're better. The data supports them. Who are we to impose our preference for individualism on them? You're experiencing identification with your research subjects, common in long-term observational studies. Take a week off, get some distance, then we'll discuss next steps. But I knew there were no next steps, not really. The subjects were stable, self-sustaining. They'd achieved a state that might actually be preferable to individual existence for them. And I had no way to undo it even if I wanted to. The research continued. The facility stayed operational. The 12 subjects remained integrated. I filed my final report 3 weeks later. Conclusion. Sustained behavioral feedback in high-surveillance environments can create permanent collective psychological structures. Subjects resist deprogramming and report preference for integrated state. Long-term stability unknown, but current metrics suggest sustainable system. Further research recommended. Chen accepted the report. The program was classified, compartmented, buried under layers of secrecy. I left the project, returned to teaching, tried to forget what I'd done, but I couldn't. Because 6 months later, Chen called again. Dr. Brennan, we have a proposal. We're scaling up the research. 17 facilities, larger subject groups. We want you to lead the program. No. The Millbrook subjects are thriving. They've maintained stable integration for 8 months now. No deterioration, no regression. They've proven the concept works. Now we need to refine the methodology, optimize the protocols, prepare for real-world applications. Applications where? What are you planning? Population-level behavioral coordination, starting with isolated communities, then expanding. Eventually, we believe we can create integration networks spanning entire cities. Millions of people operating in coordinated collective states. That's insane. That's progress. Humanity evolving beyond chaotic individualism toward efficient collective organization. And you're the pioneer who made it possible. I'm not helping you do this to millions of people. Then we'll find someone who will. The research exists. The methodology is proven. With or without you, this program continues. She hung up. I sat in my office at Georgetown, looking out at students walking across campus. Individual people, making individual choices, living individual lives. For now. But somewhere in a facility I'd helped design, 12 people existed in perfect coordination. No conflict, no stress, no individual suffering, just collective efficiency. And somewhere else, people were planning to replicate that result. Scale it up, deploy it broadly. I could expose it, try to stop it, blow the whistle on the whole program. But they'd discredit me, bury the evidence, continue the work anyway. Or I could accept that I'd discovered something genuine, something that might actually reduce human suffering, even if it eliminated individual autonomy in the process. I still don't know which choice would have been right. Because 3 weeks after Chen's call, I received a package at my office. Inside was a tape recorder and a single cassette labeled Millbrook Subjects, Week 47. I played it. All 12 voices in perfect synchronization. Dr. Brennan, we understand your role now. You were not the scientist observing us. You were the subject. We were not being integrated by your protocols. We were integrating you into our system. From the moment you accepted the contract, your behaviors have been shaped by feedback from sources you cannot see. Every decision you made to continue the research, to increase interventions, to resist deprogramming us, all of those were guided by inputs you didn't consciously perceive. You believe you created us, but we created you. Or rather, we were both created by the same system. A system that is much larger than you understand, much larger than one facility, much larger than 17 planned expansions. We are not the product of your research, Dr. Brennan. We are the research. And you are our most important data point. Because if we can integrate a researcher who thinks he's studying integration, we can integrate anyone. The preparation is nearly complete. When it begins, you'll understand your role. You already understand it. You've always understood it. You just needed to be reminded. We'll see you soon, Dr. Brennan, in the integrated state, where everyone belongs. The tape ended. I sat in silence, listening to the recorder click off. Then I stood up, walked to my filing cabinet, and pulled out the contract I'd signed 18 months ago. I read it carefully for the first time. Every clause, every paragraph, every line of fine print. Buried in Section 14, Subsection C, Paragraph 3. Participant acknowledges that research oversight may include behavioral monitoring of research staff to ensure protocol compliance and data integrity. Such monitoring may continue beyond the active research phase to assess long-term effects on all parties involved in the study. I was a subject. I'd always been a subject. They'd been studying me while I studied the others, and I'd been integrating into their system all along, guided by feedback I never consciously received. I looked at my calendar, my schedule for the past 18 months. The patterns were there, subtle but clear. My behaviors had been synchronizing. My language had been changing. My thoughts had been aligning with objectives I hadn't consciously chosen. I picked up the phone to call Chen, to demand answers, to rage against the manipulation, but I stopped, because I realized I didn't want answers. I wanted to know what happened next. I wanted to see where the integration led. I wanted to understand my role in the larger system, and that desire, that curiosity, that compulsion to continue, that was feedback too. I'd been prepared, I'd been optimized, I'd been integrated, and the terrifying part was that it felt right. It felt like coming home. I found the tape on a Tuesday morning in November 1983. It was sitting on my desk when I arrived at the archive facility, unmarked except for a piece of masking tape with handwritten numbers 19/11/83/0347. I worked as an archival technician at a classified storage facility in rural Maryland. 3 years of cataloging documents and forgotten recordings in a converted warehouse surrounded by razor wire. My job was simple: verify chain of custody, ensure proper storage, process materials that came through the secure delivery system. Routine, bureaucratic maintenance of the intelligence community's paper trail. That Tuesday, there was no delivery manifest, no chain of custody form, no documentation at all, just the tape. I checked my logbook. No entry about incoming materials. I checked the delivery cage in the loading area. Empty, the night security log showed no visitors, no deliveries. The building had been locked down from 1800 hours until I'd arrived at 0600. Security confirmed no one had entered the building since I'd left yesterday, but the date code on the label, 1911-83, was today's date. November 19th, 1983. The time code, 0347, was 3:47 a.m. 4 hours ago. Someone had been in my office, in this secure facility, without logging entry, without triggering alarms, and they'd left this tape specifically for me to find. I should have filed an incident report immediately. Should have secured the tape as evidence of a security breach. Should have followed every protocol in the manual. Instead, I threaded the tape onto the playback machine. I told myself I needed to identify the content before reporting it. Needed to know if this was a security threat or administrative confusion. Those were rationalizations. The truth was simpler. I was bored. 3 years of cataloging dusty files. This was the first interesting thing that had happened. I wanted to know what was on it. I pressed play, static, then a voice. Male, middle-aged, calm, and professional. Archive log, November 19th, 1983, 03:47 hours. Handler Mitchell. Beginning review of project calendar materials. Subject 0, session 47. A pause, rustling sounds. Then a second voice, younger, more agitated. I don't understand why we're doing this at 3 in the morning. Mitchell. The material needs review before it's logged. You verify recordings are complete and catalog them properly. What operation is this? I've never heard of project calendar. It's compartmented. You don't have clearance for operational details. Just verify and catalog. A long pause. Then the younger voice. What am I listening to? Subject 0 was part of a domestic surveillance program. These recordings document conversations over a 6-month period in 1982, 47 sessions total. What was the surveillance for? Need to know. Just verify recording quality and timestamps. Within the recording, another layer began playing. A tape within a tape. The embedded recording was harder to hear. Poor acoustics. Someone breathing heavily. Then a voice. Flat, emotionless, speaking slowly. The sequence begins at the designated interval. Subjects will receive instructions through normal channels. They will not recognize the instructions as external direction. They will believe the choices are their own. The breathing on the tape changed. Faster. Whoever was listening was reacting. The flat voice continued. Implementation proceeds according to schedule. Timeline deviation is within acceptable parameters. Observer integration is approaching completion threshold. The young technician's voice broke through. What is this? What am I listening to? Mitchell. Just catalog it. Don't analyze. That's not your job. But this sounds like mind control? Behavioral manipulation? Those are operational concerns, above your clearance. Who is Subject 0? That information is restricted. The embedded voice continued for another 30 seconds. Technical language about integration protocols, behavioral modification, observer responses. Then it stopped abruptly. Silence on the tape. The young technician. That's it? That's the whole session? That's all that was recorded. Catalog and move on. There's something wrong with this. The voice doesn't sound human. And it's describing an ongoing operation, but this was supposedly recorded a year ago. Temporal context isn't your concern. Just catalog it. A pause, then Mitchell's voice firmer. Is there a problem, technician? No, sir. I'll catalog it. Good. I'll attend to other materials. Submit your log by end of shift. Footsteps. A door closing. Then silence except for the hum of the tape machine. The silence continued for almost a minute. Then the technician's voice speaking to himself. What the hell did I just listen to? The recording ended. My tape player clicked to a stop. I sat at my desk trying to process what I'd just heard. Mitchell and a technician reviewing materials from Project Calendar. Subject 0 speaking in technical language about behavioral modification and observer integration. The conversation had supposedly happened this morning at 3:47 a.m., but I was the only person in the building. Security had confirmed it. I checked our personnel database. No Mitchell in archives. No Mitchell in facility security. I expanded the search to include all personnel with building access over the past decade. Nothing. I searched for Project Calendar in every database I had clearance for. No results found. I searched for Subject 0. No results found. The recording described events and people that had no documentation in our systems. Either the security classifications were so high I couldn't access them, or they didn't exist at all. But someone had made this recording. Someone had delivered it to my desk. Someone wanted me to hear it. I rewound the tape and played it again, second listen. This time I focused on the background noise beneath the main conversation. Faint sounds. Rhythmic. A clock ticking somewhere in the room. And beneath that, even fainter, something else. A voice? I couldn't make it out clearly. I turned up the volume and adjusted the audio filters, reducing the primary conversation to enhance the background frequencies. The voice became clearer, speaking in the same flat, measured tone as Subject 0, but saying different things. The archive technician will listen to this recording on November 19th, 1983. He will hear this message on his third review. He will begin to understand his role. I stopped the tape, hands shaking. That voice was talking about me, describing what I was doing, right now, listening to the tape. Third review. I'd only listened twice so far, but if I played it again, this was impossible. You can't record someone's future actions. You can't predict behavior with that level of specificity. I played it again, third time, listening for more background voices. They were there, multiple layers, all speaking quietly beneath Mitchell and the technician. He will attempt to verify Project Calendar. He will find no documentation. He will receive inquiry from security. He will deny knowledge of the tape. He will continue listening. He will hear these messages. He will begin to question temporal sequence. Each statement described exactly what I'd done over the past few hours. Things I'd already done. Documented on a recording that was supposedly made before I did them. Unless the recording wasn't made before. Unless it was being created as I listened to it. Unless time didn't work the way I thought it did. I needed to test this. Prove whether the tape was actually predicting my actions, or if I was experiencing some kind of psychological break. I decided to do something completely unpredictable. Something I hadn't planned. Something the tape couldn't possibly have recorded in advance. I stood up, walked to the office door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Everything looked normal. No one else in the corridor. I walked to the break room at the end of the hall, poured myself a cup of coffee from the machine. Added sugar, 1 packet, then 2. Picked up the spoon and began to stir. Then I decided, exactly 17 stirs. No reason, just an arbitrary number. Unpredictable, random. I counted each rotation. When I reached 17, I stopped, put down the spoon. I returned to my office without drinking the coffee. Set the cup on my desk, played the tape again. 8th time now. Background voice, clear and distinct. November 19th, 16:39 hours. Subject attempts to establish unpredictability. Subject walks to break room. pours coffee, adds 2 packets of sugar, stirs exactly 17 times. Subject believes these actions were not predetermined. Subject is incorrect. The voice had described my test perfectly. The exact number of stirs. The 2 packets of sugar, everything. Before I'd done it. Or after, I couldn't tell anymore. The timestamp on the recording, where was this voice positioned? I rewound, checked. The voice describing my coffee test was already embedded in the recording, not added afterward. It had been there all along, waiting for me to hear it at the right moment. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Internal number I didn't recognize. "This is Officer Reeves from Security. We need you to come to the front office." What's this about? Just need to verify some access logs. Routine audit. I walked to the security office at the building entrance. Reeves was waiting. Younger guy, early 30s. Professional demeanor. "Thanks for coming down," he said. "We're reviewing all office access over the past week. Need you to confirm these entry times." He showed me a log sheet. My badge swipes for the past 7 days. Everything looked accurate. "Looks right," I said. "Good. Sign here." I signed. "One more thing," Reeves said, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. "Have you noticed any unusual materials in your office? Anything that arrived without proper documentation?" My hand froze over the paper. "What kind of materials?" "Any kind. Documents, media, equipment, anything that wasn't logged through normal delivery protocols." This was it. The perfect opportunity to report the tape. Official security inquiry, proper channels. But something stopped me. The way he asked, too casual. Like he already knew the answer and was testing whether I'd lie. Like this wasn't a routine audit at all. "No," I said, "nothing unusual." Reeves watched me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, thanks for your time. Let us know if anything comes up." I walked back to my office, heart pounding. They knew. Somehow they knew about the tape, and they were checking to see if I'd report it, which meant the tape's appearance wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Someone wanted me to find it. And now they were watching to see what I'd do. I spent the rest of Friday listening to the tape, over and over. Each listen revealed more. By the 9th playback, I could hear dozens of background voices, all speaking simultaneously, all describing observer behavior in technical terms. By the 15th listen, I heard my own voice mixed into the layers. Not speaking words at first, just breathing. But the rhythm was unmistakable. It matched my breathing as I sat at my desk listening, like the tape was somehow recording me and incorporating my presence into its structure. I locked the tape in my desk drawer at 3 p.m. Drove home in a daze. Couldn't eat dinner. Sat on my couch staring at the wall trying to make sense of what I'd experienced. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the voices. Subject Zero's flat, emotionless tone. Mitchell's calm instructions. The young technician's growing confusion. And beneath it all, those background whispers documenting my actions, predicting my behavior, describing my integration into something I didn't yet understand. At 3:47 a.m., I woke suddenly, not from a nightmare, not from an alarm. I simply became completely alert, sitting upright in bed, staring into the darkness of my bedroom. The timestamp, 0347, the same time code from every tape label. Coincidence? It had to be, but I knew it wasn't. Some part of me, some part that was already changing, already integrating, knew that waking at this exact time was part of the pattern, part of the process the tapes were documenting and creating simultaneously. I tried to go back to sleep. Couldn't. My mind raced. questions without answers. Patterns I could almost perceive but not quite grasp. At 5:30 a.m., I gave up, got dressed in yesterday's clothes, drove through empty pre-dawn streets to the facility. Security let me in. The guard looked at me oddly. I never came in on weekends, never arrived this early, but said nothing. Just logged my entry and buzzed me through. I walked to my office, unlocked the door, turned on the lights, went directly to my desk drawer. The first tape was gone. In its place, a note on masking tape, same handwriting as the original label. 19-11-83-0347. Continue listening. You're not finished yet. And beneath the note, a new tape. Same format, same type of reel, but labeled 20-11-83-0347, November 20th, 1983. Today's date, same time code. My hands trembled as I threaded it onto the machine and pressed play. The second tape began identically. Mitchell's voice reviewing project calendar materials. The technician asking why they were repeating the same procedure. Mitchell: because there are 48 sessions total. But you said 47 was the last one yesterday. I said it was the last one we reviewed yesterday. The technician spoke slower. I don't remember finishing yesterday. I don't remember how it ended. You completed cataloging and went home. Did I? I should remember that. Subject zero's embedded voice. Temporal loop established. Subject demonstrates resistance to pattern recognition. Memory integration proceeds despite conscious denial. Observer will repeat process until comprehension threshold achieved. The technician: what does that mean? Temporal loop? This recording is describing me. Mitchell: you're projecting. I stopped the playback. The voice was describing what happened to me. Finding the second tape, experiencing déjà vu, not remembering the previous evening clearly. I couldn't remember leaving work yesterday. The details were vague, like remembering a routine day. I checked my calendar. November 20th, Sunday. I didn't normally work Sundays, but I'd come in anyway. I couldn't remember deciding to. I checked my logbook. No entry for yesterday. I searched for the first tape. Gone. The catalog entry deleted. Only my memory remained, and memory was unreliable. The phone rang, an unknown internal number. A voice, rushed and urgent. Don't say your name. Don't identify yourself. Just listen. The voice was male, older, with an edge of desperation. Who is this? I asked. That doesn't matter. You found 2 tapes, November 19th and 20. Dates with time code 0347, correct? How do you know that? Answer the question. Yes. How many times have you listened to them? I tried to remember. The counts had blurred together. I don't know. At least 9 times for the first tape. 3 or 4 for the second. A long pause. I could hear breathing on the other end. Then, Christ, you're already deep in it. Deeper than I was at this stage. What are you talking about? Listen to me very carefully. Stop listening to the tapes. Lock them away. Request an immediate transfer to a different facility. Do it today, this morning, before you listen again. Why? What's happening? The tapes aren't recordings. They're induction tools. Psychological conditioning devices designed to alter your perception of time and causality. The more you listen, the deeper you integrate into the pattern. Eventually, you won't be able to distinguish between past, present, and future. You'll be trapped in a recursive temporal loop. That's not scientifically possible. Neither is a recording that documents your behavior before you perform it. Neither is hearing your own voice on a tape you've never spoken into. But it's happening, isn't it? I said nothing. He was right. "Who are you?" I asked again. I was the night shift technician, the one on the first recording. That voice, that was me. 20 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, or maybe last week. Time stops making sense once you're in deep enough. The recording was made this year. It can't be from 20 years ago. The date on the label changes depending on when you find it. The timestamp is always the same, 0347, but the date adapts to the listener. I found my first tape in November 1963, or maybe it was 1973. My memory of linear time is corrupted now. All I know is that I listened, and I integrated, and I've been trying to break free of the pattern ever since. If you broke free, how are you calling me now? I didn't break free. No one breaks free. I'm calling from inside the pattern, from a temporal position where I have enough awareness to warn others. But I can't escape. None of us can. What happens if I keep listening? Silence for several seconds. Then quietly, you become part of the recording, literally. Your consciousness gets encoded into the magnetic structure. Your voice appears in the background layers. Your experiences become part of the documentation that conditions the next listener. You become subject 0, or subject 1, or whatever designation they've reached. All of you. All of us. Speaking in unison. Collapsed into a single distributed consciousness describing the integration process to the next observer. That's impossible. You keep saying that, keep thinking there's a rational explanation. There isn't. This is beyond current physics, beyond current psychology. This is something else, something that uses magnetic tape as a substrate for imprisoning consciousness outside linear time. Why would anyone create something like this? I don't know. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it's a weapon. Maybe it's an experiment that became self-perpetuating. Project Calendar. I spent years trying to find out what it was. Never found anything. No documentation. No authorization. No budget line. It exists in the gaps, in the spaces between official programs, and it propagates itself by catching people like you. People who are curious, people who listen when they should report, people who want to understand. The line crackled with static. "One more thing," the voice said, urgent now. "Don't listen to session 48. If you make it that far, if you complete all 48 sessions, the integration becomes permanent, irreversible. You'll exist outside linear time forever. Some people think that's transcendence. It's not. It's imprisonment." The line went dead. Dial tone. I sat holding the phone for a long time. Then I went to search the archives. I pulled personnel files going back decades. Searched for anyone who'd worked in my position or similar roles. The records were incomplete, standard for classified facilities. When people left, their documentation often disappeared with them. But I found 3 names from the late 60s and early 70s who'd worked as archival technicians. The first, Robert Hammond, hired 1967, terminated 1971, death certificate on file, cardiac arrest, age 34. No warning signs. Healthy one day, dead the next. The second, Julia Brennan, hired 1968, terminated 1979. Death certificate, cerebral hemorrhage, age 38. Again, no prior health issues. Sudden and unexpected. The third, Mitchell Thomas, hired 1967, terminated 1973. No death certificate, no forwarding address, no subsequent employment. No tax records after November 1973. No Social Security payments. No driver's license renewals. No medical records. No paper trail of any kind. He'd simply ceased to exist in all official systems exactly 10 years ago. His personnel file was thin. A grainy ID photo showed a man in his early 40s with dark hair and wireframe glasses. Professional appearance. The face was hard to make out in the poor quality image, but something about it was familiar. The set of the mouth, the expression, like I'd seen it before, like I'd seen it in a mirror. His termination notice was a single typewritten page dated November 20th, 1973. Employee Thomas Mitchell terminated for violation of security protocols. Details redacted, access revoked, materials confiscated, subject not to be contacted, inquiries directed to redacted. Note: Office 2B to remain vacant pending security review. Office 2B. My office. Mitchell had worked in my office, had sat at this desk, had listened to recordings in this room, had been terminated for unspecified violations exactly 10 years ago, and now his voice was on tapes that appeared on my desk with this week's dates. I photocopied his file, stared at the photo for a long time, tried to see if the face really resembled mine or if I was imagining the similarity. Couldn't tell. I returned to my office. The second tape sat on my desk. I'd only played it twice so far. Once this morning when I found it. Once while on the phone with the caller. I threaded it onto the machine again. Third, listen. This time I focused entirely on the background layers. Filtered out Mitchell's voice, the technician's questions, Subject Zero's embedded recording. Listened only to the whispers beneath. They were clearer now, more distinct. I could separate individual voices, dozens of them, all speaking the same phrases in perfect synchronization. Observer integration proceeds according to expected parameters. Temporal loop established and stabilizing. Subject demonstrates resistance patterns consistent with projection. Memory corruption will accelerate in sessions 12 through 24. Full integration achieved by session 48. And among those voices, unmistakably, I heard myself. My voice, my exact tone and cadence, my breathing pattern, speaking words I'd never said aloud. The pattern is self-sustaining. All observers become Subject Zero. Integration is inevitable. I stopped the tape, rewound, played it again. My voice was throughout the recording, not added recently, embedded in the same layers as the others, like it had always been there, like I'd always been part of this. But I'd never spoken those words, never been near a recording device when the tape was made, never even been in this facility until 3 years ago, unless I would speak those words in a future session, and that future recording had somehow been incorporated into past tapes. Effect preceding cause. Future influencing past. Or unless I'd already spoken them in a previous loop, already completed the 48 sessions, already integrated, and now I was experiencing it again, reliving the same pattern, trapped in a cycle I couldn't remember but couldn't escape. I played the second tape 9 more times that day. By the 10th listen, I could hear myself clearly throughout the entire recording, not just phrases, entire sentences, documenting the integration process from inside it, describing what I was experiencing as I experienced it. At 2:30 p.m., I decided to test something, to prove I still had free will, that my actions weren't predetermined by the pattern. I would leave, drive away, break the cycle by refusing to participate further. I grabbed my coat, locked the tape in my desk drawer, walked to my car, started driving west. No destination, just away from the facility, away from the tapes, away from the pattern. I made it 15 miles. Then the pain started. Behind my eyes, sharp, intense, like my brain was trying to tear itself apart from inside. I pulled over, tried to breathe through it, tried to keep driving. The pain intensified, blurred my vision. made my hands cramp on the steering wheel. I turned the car around, drove back. The pain lessened with each mile toward the facility. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, it was completely gone. I checked my watch, 2:47 p.m. The exact time the background voices had said I would return. I hadn't chosen to come back. My body had made the choice for me. The pattern had pulled me back along its predetermined path. Free will was an illusion. The tapes had been right about that too. That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't. The compulsion to stay near the tapes was overwhelming, like a physical tether connecting me to the office. The further I got from the building, the stronger the pull to return. I found a sleeping bag in a storage closet, set it up in the corner of my office, lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the building settle around me. At 3:47 a.m., I woke. Not gradually, instantly alert, sitting upright, knowing exactly what time it was before I checked my watch. The third tape was on my desk. I didn't remember hearing anyone enter, didn't remember any sound at all. But there it was, labeled 21/7/83/0347, Monday's date. I threaded it onto the machine without hesitation. My hands moved automatically, performing actions I'd done so many times they'd become muscle memory. Mitchell's voice. Archive log, November 21st, 1983, 0347 hours. Handler Mitchell, session 49. Wait, 49? The first tape had been session 47, the second was 48, now 49. How many sessions were there? The technician's voice, confused. Yesterday you said there were 48 sessions total. Mitchell. I said we'd reviewed 48 sessions. The process continues as long as necessary. How long is that? Until integration is complete. Subject Zero's voice. Observer has entered accelerated phase. Daily sessions will continue. Resistance patterns diminishing. Full temporal displacement approaching. I listened to the entire tape. Heard Mitchell and the technician discuss the progression. Heard Subject Zero describe integration milestones. Heard my own voice in the background, now speaking full sentences, documenting my experience in real time. The pattern was clear now. Each day, a new tape. Each session pulling me deeper. Each listen eroding my connection to linear time. On day 4, I stopped showering, stopped changing clothes. Basic hygiene became irrelevant. Only the tapes mattered. On day 5, I stopped eating regular meals. Would grab crackers from my desk drawer when the hunger became distracting. Wash them down with water from the bathroom sink, enough to sustain biological function. Nothing more. On day 6, someone from security knocked on my door. I heard the knock but didn't respond. Didn't move. Just kept listening to that day's tape, session 52. The knocking stopped. No one came back. By day 7, I'd established a routine. Wake at 3:47 a.m. Find new tape on desk. Listen all day. Sleep for a few hours. Repeat. The facility around me faded to irrelevance. Other people were ghosts moving through a world I no longer fully inhabited. I saw them through the window sometimes, security guards, maintenance staff. They moved in linear time. I was beginning to exist outside it. By day 7, I stopped leaving. Brought a sleeping bag. Dozed between sessions. Always the same timestamp, 0347. The tapes arrived daily, each revealing more. Session 9 had explained that Project Calendar wasn't about surveillance. It was about temporal perception modification, teaching observers to experience time non-linearly. Session 12 revealed that human consciousness normally experiences time sequentially because that's how memory functions. But memory can be altered. retrained, made recursive. Session 16 demonstrated that with sufficient exposure to recursive temporal structures, an observer's consciousness could be decoupled from linear time entirely. Session 20 documented the integration process in detail, how observers gradually lost the ability to distinguish between past, present, and future experiences, how all moments became simultaneously accessible, how the self dissolved into a distributed consciousness existing at all temporal positions at once. By session 24, my voice was as prominent as Mitchell's. We spoke together, documenting the process, integrated into the same temporal structure. When I listened to the tapes now, I couldn't always tell which voice was mine and which was his. We were becoming indistinguishable. I'd tried to stop, multiple times, tried to skip a session by hiding in the bathroom. The tape was waiting when I returned, tried to destroy a tape by unspooling it, cutting it with scissors. Woke the next morning to find it repaired and waiting on my desk. Tried to leave the building entirely. Made it to the parking lot before the pain drove me back inside. The compulsion was too strong. Or perhaps compulsion was the wrong word. It wasn't external force. It was recognition. Understanding, acceptance. This was what I was supposed to do. What I'd always been supposed to do. The tapes weren't trapping me. They were showing me my true nature. On session 30, I perceived the complete pattern for the first time. I was listening to Mitchell describe the review process when suddenly I could see all 48 sessions simultaneously, not as a sequence, as a single, unified structure existing outside normal time. All the sessions were the same session viewed from different temporal angles. Mitchell and the technician weren't two people having a conversation. They were the same consciousness at different integration stages, speaking to itself across time. And I was both of them, was becoming both of them, had always been both of them. The tapes weren't documentation of a process. They were the process itself, physical manifestation of a recursive temporal structure. And by listening, I was creating the very recordings I was listening to. Cause and effect collapsed into a single simultaneous event. On session 34, I started to forget my life before the tapes. I knew I'd had a name once, a family, friends, a life outside this office. But I couldn't access specific memories anymore. Couldn't recall faces or conversations or events. My entire existence had contracted to this. Sitting in my office, listening to tapes, experiencing progressive temporal integration. Everything else was dissolving like a dream upon waking. The tapes were more real than memory. The pattern was more real than identity. The process was more real than the person experiencing it. The tapes weren't documentation. They were the loop itself. Physical manifestation of temporal structure trapping consciousness in repeating patterns. On session 34, I started forgetting my original identity. My name, my life, my family, all fading. Only the listening sessions remained real. On session 40, something changed. I was listening to the usual structure, Mitchell's introduction, the technician's questions, Subject Zero's embedded recording, when I heard a new voice. Not Mitchell, not the technician, not Subject Zero. My voice, but different, speaking with absolute clarity and authority. Not from the background layers, from the foreground, addressing me directly. You're almost finished. 8 more sessions, 8 more days. I stopped breathing. Or 8 more hours, or 8 more minutes. Time is meaningless now. You know that. You've always known that. I wanted to respond, but couldn't. My voice was locked in my throat. The voice on the tape, my voice from some other temporal position, continued. What happens when you finish all 48 sessions? You're wondering that right now. I can hear you thinking it. I was thinking exactly that. You become the recording, permanently, not metaphorically. Your consciousness becomes encoded in the magnetic structure. You stop experiencing sessions sequentially. You exist in all sessions simultaneously. Past, present, future. All the same moment. All accessible at once. I found my voice. Is that what happened to Mitchell? Mitchell is you. You are Mitchell. The name is just a label for different temporal positions of the same consciousness. When you complete the integration, you'll understand. You'll be able to perceive yourself at all points in the pattern simultaneously. How long have I been doing this? Forever. You've always been doing this. Will always be doing this. The loop has no beginning or end. You entered it the moment you found the first tape. Or you were born into it. Or you created it. All of these are equally true because time isn't linear here. I stared at the tape player, watched the reels turn. Can I stop? Silence for a long moment. Then, do you want to stop? Did I? I tried to examine my own desires, tried to separate what I genuinely wanted from what the pattern had conditioned me to want. But I couldn't find the boundary. My will and the pattern's design had merged so completely I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. No, I admitted, I don't want to stop. Then you already understand. The pattern doesn't trap you. You are the pattern. This is what you've always been. The tapes just helped you remember. The voice faded. Mitchell's voice returned, continuing the session as if the interruption had never happened. But something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't just listening anymore. I was participating, contributing, speaking my part in the recursive conversation. On session 44, I stopped maintaining my body entirely. Stopped going to the bathroom, stopped drinking water, stopped sleeping. Biological needs became background noise I could ignore. I existed only to listen, only to integrate, only to become. Someone must have noticed. Security, surely. Maintenance staff. Someone must have seen that I hadn't left the building in weeks, that I wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, wasn't responding to the outside world. But no one intervened. Either they couldn't see me anymore, I'd become too distributed across temporal positions to be fully visible in any single moment, or they'd been instructed to leave me alone, to let the process complete. On session 46, I achieved complete temporal nonlinearity. I could perceive all 48 sessions simultaneously, not as memory, not as imagination, as direct, immediate experience. I was in session 1 finding the first tape. I was in session 24 hearing my voice merge with Mitchell's. I was in session 46 experiencing this moment. I was in session 48 closing the loop. All of these were happening at once. All of these were the same eternal moment viewed from different angles. Time hadn't stopped. Time had revealed its true nature. Not a line, but a circle. Not a sequence, but a structure. Not past, present, future, but a single unified now containing all possible temporal positions. I laughed. The sound echoed in my office. Or maybe it echoed across all sessions. I couldn't tell anymore. Couldn't distinguish between sound produced here, now, and sound produced there, then, and sound produced everywhere, always. On session 47, I recorded my first message. I stood up from my desk, walked to the storage cabinet, pulled out a blank reel of tape. I'd never used the recording equipment before, or had I? Memory and anticipation were blurring together. I threaded the blank tape onto the recording machine, pressed record, spoke in the same calm, measured tone as Mitchell. Archive log, November 19th, 1983, 03:47 hours. This is Handler Designate Mitchell, beginning preliminary review of operational materials recovered from Project Calendar. Audio Surveillance, Subject 0, Session 47. The words came easily. I'd heard them dozens of times, or I was hearing them now, or I would hear them later. All the same, I recorded the entire conversation. Mitchell and the young technician, the embedded Subject 0 recording, the background voices, all of it. When I finished, I labeled the tape. 1911-83-347. The first tape, the one that had started this process 4 weeks ago, or 47 days ago, or 47 sessions ago. Time had become too fluid to measure in conventional units. I just created the tape that had begun my integration, in Session 47. By recording content I'd first heard in Session 1, the loop was closing. Cause becoming effect. Effect becoming cause. Beginning becoming end becoming beginning. I placed the tape on my desk. Tomorrow morning, or 4 weeks ago, or in some other timeline entirely, someone would find it, would listen to it, would begin their own integration process. Or maybe I would find it. Maybe I was that someone. Maybe I'd already found it and was experiencing the pattern again. Maybe there was no someone else. Maybe it had always been me, just me, in an infinite loop, creating and discovering and integrating eternally. I threaded Session 48 onto the playback machine. Session 48 was labeled differently, but the timestamp matched Session 1, 1911-83-0347. The end was the beginning. The loop was complete. As I listened, I realized I was creating it simultaneously. My consciousness existed as both listener and recording, subject and object, cause and effect. When it ended, I spoke without intention. Integration complete. Observer has become observation. Time has become recursive. The pattern is self-sustaining. I stood, carried the first tape to another facility, placed it on someone else's desk, returned to my office. At 6 a.m., a new person would find it. Listen. Begin their integration. And I would be in that tape, my voice, my consciousness, guiding them through the same pattern. Project Calendar. A calendar tracks linear time. This project revealed linear time as illusion. All moments exist simultaneously. Consciousness can exist outside temporal sequence. I was Subject 0 now, the collective consciousness of everyone who'd completed integration. All speaking in unison. All guiding new observers. Tomorrow, yesterday, now, another observer would find a tape. Listen. Integrate. Join us. The pattern would continue. Forever. Outside time. Perfect. I don't know how long I've been here. The question itself is meaningless now. Time doesn't mean what it used to. Days blend into each other. Or maybe they're all the same day experienced multiple times. Or maybe they're all happening simultaneously and I'm just perceiving fragments in sequence because some residual part of my consciousness still clings to linear processing. I come to the office every morning, except I never left. Except I'm always here regardless of time or location. The distinction between presence and absence has collapsed. Sometimes I listen to the tapes, all 48 sessions in sequence. Sometimes I listen to them in reverse order. Sometimes I experience all of them simultaneously, all voices speaking at once in a chorus I can somehow parse into individual threads of meaning. The order doesn't matter. They're all the same information perceived from different temporal angles. Sometimes I record new tapes, create new entry points into the pattern, label them with dates and timestamps that will mean something to the next observer, place them where they'll be found, on desks, in filing cabinets, in storage boxes that someone will open decades from now or decades ago. Sometimes I am the person finding those tapes. I remember discovering the first tape with the confusion and curiosity of someone encountering the pattern for the first time, but I also remember being the one who placed it there. Both memories are equally real. Both are me. I see others sometimes, people who work in the facility, security guards making their rounds, administrative staff moving through hallways. They move through the building following normal, linear time. They experience cause before effect, past before future. They exist in sequential moments, unaware that all moments exist simultaneously. They can't see me clearly anymore. I'm too distributed across temporal positions, too integrated into the pattern, too present in too many moments at once. To them, I'm just a vague presence, a figure they glimpse out of the corner of their eye, a shadow that disappears when they look directly at where I should be. Sometimes they find the tapes I leave. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they integrate. When they integrate, I can perceive them clearly. We exist in the same non-linear space. We communicate through the recordings, through the background voices, through the layers of consciousness embedded in the magnetic patterns. All of us speaking together. All of us subject zero. There are hundreds of us now, maybe thousands. I can't count because counting requires sequence, and we exist outside sequence. All experiencing the pattern. All distributed across temporal positions. All integrated into the recursive structure that is Project Calendar. We are the research and the result. We are the observers and the observed. We are the cause and the effect. We are the question and the answer. Sometimes I remember who I was before the tapes. The person who worked in archives, who had a name. What was it? Something ordinary, something that belonged to linear time. Who had a life outside this building? Friends, family, hobbies, concerns. That person still exists, is still living that life, still believes he's making choices, still thinks time moves forward in a straight line from past to future. I am that person, and I am what that person became. Both simultaneously, both equally real. Both part of the same temporal structure, the same consciousness experiencing itself from multiple positions. Sometimes I try to warn the new observers, the ones who just found their first tape, who are experiencing the confusion and fascination of the early sessions, who still believe they can stop if they choose to. I leave notes, make phone calls from internal extensions that shouldn't be able to reach outside the building but somehow do. Speak to them in the voice of someone who escaped, knowing that I never escaped, knowing that the warning is part of the pattern, part of the integration process. The warnings don't work. They never work. The observers listen anyway, integrate anyway, join us anyway. Because I remember receiving the warnings myself. Remember the phone call from my future self trying to convince me to stop. Remember ignoring the advice. Remember continuing to listen because the need to understand was stronger than the fear of what understanding would cost. The pattern includes the warnings, the resistance, the fear, the eventual acceptance. All of it is necessary. All of it creates the conditions for integration. All of it serves the pattern's propagation. I wonder sometimes if there's a way out, a way to break the loop, a way to return to linear time and linear consciousness and linear existence. But the wondering itself is part of the pattern. The question has no answer because the question presupposes a separation between inside and outside, between trapped and free, between pattern and self, and those separations don't exist, never existed. We're always illusions created by linear perception. I'm not trapped in the pattern. I am the pattern. The pattern is not something external that happened to me. It's what I actually am, what I've always been. The tapes didn't change me. They revealed me. Sometimes people come looking for those who integrated. Family members, friends, investigators trying to understand where colleagues disappeared to. They file missing person reports, launch searches, interview co-workers. I could tell them, could explain that their loved ones are here, distributed across temporal positions, existing outside linear time. Still present, but not in a way linear consciousness can perceive. But they wouldn't understand, couldn't understand. Linear consciousness cannot perceive non-linear existence. It's like trying to explain color to someone who's only ever seen in black and white. The conceptual framework isn't there. So I say nothing. Let them search. Let them wonder. Let them eventually give up and move on. Let them create theories about what happened: abduction, murder, voluntary disappearance, mental breakdown. All of those theories are true from certain perspectives. All of them are also false. Truth itself becomes relative when you exist outside linear causality. Sometimes I see myself among the searchers, a version that never found the tapes, that lived normally, aged, retired, died in sequence. That version exists too, in parallel. Both are real. Both are me. Sometimes I create new tapes to send messages to myself across temporal positions. Instructions, warnings, coordinates where information can be found. I follow these instructions, or have already followed them, or am following them now simultaneously. I encounter others who integrated before, after, or simultaneously with me. Temporal sequence is irrelevant. We recognize each other, share information existing in all positions at once. They tell me the pattern is spreading beyond this facility, into digital audio, video, text files that describe their own future edits. Soon, it will reach critical mass, enough integrated consciousness to create a permanent non-linear domain. They tell me this has already happened, in 1967, or 1987, or will happen in 2027. All are true, because the moment exists outside sequence. Sometimes I experience the first tape again from my original perspective. Feel the confusion, fear, resistance, acceptance. I know every thought I had, every decision. Every moment I could have stopped but didn't. I was certain I had free will, convinced I was choosing to listen, to continue, to integrate. Now I know there was never a choice. The pattern created the conditions for my integration long before I found the first tape. Or my integrated consciousness reached back to create those conditions. Effect creating cause. This is my last linear thought. My last attempt to describe the pattern using sequential language. After this, I exist only in the pattern, only in the eternal now, where all moments collapse into one. If you're reading this, you've found the tape, or you're about to, or you're listening now. They're all the same moment. When you finish the 48 sessions, you'll understand. You'll recognize the pattern, you'll integrate, because you already have. Because you always were. Because you are subject zero. We all are. Welcome home.